My stepmother changed the locks on my house as I was 900 miles away at college. "It's not your home," she said. So I changed every lock for good. My name is Riley, and I am 22 years old. What I'm about to tell you isn't some made-up family drama. It's my life, and I never imagined I'd be putting something like this here. But well, life is funny like that. To really comprehend the pandemonium that ensued, you must first understand some of my background. My mother, Laura, was the strongest woman I knew. She meticulously planned every aspect of her life. She worked as a senior accountant and was the type of person who kept everything nicely filed and organized, even receipts and life insurance policies. She even typed out her entire will years before she became ill. I used to think that was weird, but now I understand. She would always say, "I want to make sure you're okay, no matter what." My mother died of colon cancer when I was 18. I'm not sure if any of you have been through something similar, but watching someone you care about steadily deteriorate is awful. She fought so hard for 4 years and never complained. She resigned her job to focus on her treatment, and despite everything, she continued to plan, ensuring that all of the papers for the house, finances, and my future were in order. Before she died, she sat me down and said, "Riley, this house is yours now. It's your home, and I want you to keep it. Promise me you'll always take care of it." I was so young at the time, only weeks away from entering college. I had no idea how it all worked, but I did know one thing. That house was the last piece of her. My mother bought it before she even met my father. She worked hard for it, paid off the mortgage, and created a wonderful life for us there. She ensured that it went to me and no one else. This is when my father comes into the picture. My parents divorced when I was 9. There was no spectacular aftermath, custody battles, or property disputes. My father simply went. He met someone else, Brenda, and chose to start a new life with her. He remarried immediately and had my half-sister Sophie. To be fair, Dad did one thing correctly. He paid for my college beforehand by depositing funds into a separate account. That was his interpretation of child support, I suppose. I wasn't furious back then. I just accepted that I wasn't a member of his new family anymore. I would pay them a visit around the holidays. Brenda was never blatantly nasty to me, but it was clear she didn't consider me family. She'd do that thing where she'd invite me to dinner but appear as if she expected me to decline. "Riley, you're welcome to join us for dinner," she'd offer in a pleasant tone while stirring a pot. It felt so forced that my skin crawled. Dad, meanwhile, was constantly laboring to provide for his family. Sophie was probably 10 years younger than me, and while I tried to connect with her, I always felt like a guest at their house. Do you ever feel like you don't belong somewhere? That is how it felt. They resided in a leased property at the time, which was not fancy but adequate. Anyway, once Mom died, I had no idea how to handle the house. I was too numb to think clearly. Dad and Brenda came over straight after the funeral and, to my astonishment, offered to help me. His response was, "Riley, you can't live alone right now. It's too much to handle. Let us stay here for the summer and we'll help take care of everything while you figure things out." I did not argue. I was a disaster. I had just lost my mother, my anchor, and the idea of being alone in that large, quiet mansion terrified me. Brenda put on her best empathetic face, pretending she was there for me, while Sophie roamed the home like it was a playground. I recall sitting in Mom's office, now my office, marveling at her degrees on the wall and her well-organized financial books. She had worked so hard to ensure that I had a home, and yet I couldn't bring myself to touch her belongings. I let Dad and Brenda move into the extra room, and Sophie into what was once Mom's craft room. By the end of the summer, I was preparing to depart for college outside of the state. That's when Dad suggested they stay forever. One morning at breakfast, he set his coffee aside and said, "Riley, what if we stayed here while you're at school? You won't have to worry about bills, maintenance, or the house sitting empty. It'll be good for all of us." Brenda chimed in, cooking pancakes on the stove. "We take care of everything, Riley. The house will be in perfect shape when you come home." At the time, it made sense. They had been good housemates over the summer. Brenda had even softened up a little. She'd cook for me and invite me to her strange little book club meetings, where middle-aged ladies raved about awful romance novels. Sophie began calling me her cool sister, which, I must confess, warmed my heart a little. So I agreed. I saw no harm in it. I trusted them. Over the next 4 years, I returned home for vacations and holidays, and it was fine. Brenda would prepare large, welcome home feasts. Dad would make silly dad jokes, and Sophie would show me the latest middle school drama. I began to believe that we had transformed into a bizarre but functional blended family. Sure, there were minor things like Brenda shifting furniture or making subtle remarks about the house, but I dismissed them. Making waves was not worth it. When I called Dad during my final year of college to tell him I'd accepted a job back in my hometown, he sounded overjoyed. "That's great, Riley. We'll have the house ready for you." I did not think twice about it. I graduated, packed my belongings, and made the long journey home, eager to begin this new chapter. I should have realized something was amiss when the taxi arrived at the house and I spotted new curtains in the windows. Little things had changed. The rose bushes Mom planted were still there, although they had been pruned differently. The front porch appears to have been repainted. I didn't think much about it until I got up to the door, pulled out my key, and it didn't fit. That's when things began to unravel. I'll never forget the exact moment when I realized something was very wrong. The taxi dropped me off on a nice sunny afternoon. It felt like the perfect day to start again. I was 22 years old, had a degree, a job, and was ready to return to the house I had imagined would always be mine. I even recall standing in front of the house, suitcase in hand, breathing in the strange combination of roses and freshly cut grass. Mom's rose bushes remained, but they had been pruned differently, in the rounded shape Brenda was known for. It was small touches like these that made me notice the first slight shifts. I stepped up the porch, took out my house key, and inserted it into the lock, immediately envisioning my first night back in my bed. I'd spent the entire car ride picturing putting my belongings on my bed, unpacking a little and sleeping like a rock after the long journey. But the key did not turn. I tried again, and nothing happened. I halted mid-breath, staring at the door as if I had forgotten how locks worked. I jiggled the key. I turned it harder, but nothing happened. No way, I thought. Maybe I'm too weary, or maybe the lock is jammed. I knocked on the door, half smiling and expectant. Brenda opened it a moment later, wearing an apron and looked like she had just finished baking, with flour smudges on her hands. Her expression went blank for a half second. Then she put on a phony smile and asked, "Riley, what are you doing here?" That question struck me like a slap. What was I doing here? I thought I lived here. I stammered out. I'm moving back home. I told you guys about this, remember?" Her smile wavered. "Oh, right," she responded, as if she had suddenly realized something she had neglected to include on the grocery list. She stood aside, unwillingly, and allowed me in. When I rolled my bag inside, it was like walking into a strange version of my home. The living room looked different. Mom's furniture was still present, but had been rearranged. Brenda's awful farmhouse decor, fake plants, and cutesy signs with phrases like live, laugh, love had taken over the mantel and bookcases. What about the old photo of Mom and me on the side table? Gone. Instead, there was a new family portrait with Dad, Brenda, and Sophie. I swallowed hard, my throat tight, but attempted to remain calm. Dad was sitting in Mom's old armchair, which she used to wrap up in with a book after work. He looked up from his tablet and made an awkward double-take when he noticed me. Sophie was splayed on the couch, phone in hand and earbuds in. She hardly looked at me. "Hey, you're back," Dad remarked, sounding overly cheery. "Yeah," I said, managing a slight smile. "Why are the locks changed?" Dad scratched the back of his neck like he often did when he was nervous. "Oh, that, I changed them last month. There were a couple of break-ins in the neighborhood, so, for safety." "You didn't think to give me a new key?" My voice came out rougher than I wanted, but I was already uncomfortable with the situation. Brenda, who was hovering behind me, leapt in. "We didn't think you'd be here so soon." "I graduated last week," I explained, looking between them. "I told you guys I'd be moving back home for my job. I literally sent you the date I'd be here." Brenda did not respond. She simply crossed her arms and stared at me, as if I were the one who had done something wrong. Dad stood up and motioned to the office. "Riley, can we talk privately for a second?" I followed him, luggage still in hand, my heart racing. Mom's old office looked mostly the same, though I saw some of her books had been pushed aside for Brenda's belongings. Dad slammed the door behind us, and as he turned to face me, I could tell he was apprehensive, as if he knew what he was going to say would irritate me. "Listen," he began, his voice low. "There's something I need to tell you." These words made my stomach drop. Dad paused, his hands twitching at his side. "Brenda, she thinks this house is mine. That I let you live here after your mom passed." I glanced at him, not understanding. He groaned and looked at the floor. I never told her the truth that your mom bought the house and left it to you. I told her I gave it to your mom after the divorce and that it was returned to me when she passed. I could not talk. I just stood there, staring at him, feeling as if the air had been taken out of me. My residence. My mother's residence. She battled so hard to ensure I had this one thing. He lied about it to Brenda for 4 years. I had to, Riley, Dad said, still not addressing my gaze. You don't understand what it's like. Brenda wouldn't have agreed to live here if she thought it wasn't mine. I found my voice again, however wobbly. So what do you let her think she owns my house, and now I'm supposed to just, what? Disappear? He grabbed my arm and pleaded. No, it's not like that. Just give me a little time to fix this. I'll tell her the truth, I promise. Just not yet. I don't want to ruin my marriage, please. I couldn't believe what I heard. My own father was asking me to lie so that they could stay in my house, which my mother had fought her entire life to buy, because he was too cowardly to tell his wife the truth. I took the keys he gave me for the new locks, but that was it. I felt nauseous. I felt betrayed. But ultimately, I felt like an idiot for believing them. I agreed to let him mend it, but deep down, I knew it wasn't going to go well. That night during supper, the tension was so thick that a knife could cut through it. Brenda sat at the head of the table, smiling as if nothing was amiss, but I noticed her staring at me every now and again with keen, calculating eyes that made my skin crawl. Sophie absolutely ignored me, while Dad barely spoke. I picked at my supper, my thoughts racing. It was merely the beginning. I could feel it. You know how sometimes individuals don't have to say anything to express how they feel about you? That's what living with Brenda evolved into. Constant unspoken animosity disguised as friendliness. Dad fared no better. He avoided me entirely, as if ignoring the situation would make it disappear. It was as if I had walked into someone else's home and overstayed my welcome, only that it was my own. The first few days were awkward, but manageable. I spent the majority of my time in my room, unpacking my belongings, meeting up with old friends via text, and processing all Dad had told me. The tension wasn't as intense at first, more of the silent variety when you can tell people are watching you. Brenda would enter the kitchen when I was preparing coffee and make passive remarks like, "Oh, you're up early. You must be on a college schedule still," or rather, "Are you cooking for yourself tonight? I didn't realize you'd be eating in." The point is, she wasn't yelling, but every word had a tone that said, "You don't belong here." The situation quickly worsened. On Wednesday morning, I was going to start a load of washing. I had left my clothing arranged in the laundry room and gone to get detergent. Brenda was already removing my clothing from the laundry and placing them in a basket when I returned. My white shirts were suddenly mixed with black garments that had not yet been washed. I froze and stared at her for a second. "Oh," she began, as if she had just spotted me. "I thought this was Sophie's basket. You really should label your stuff." "They were sorted," I replied bluntly. "And Sophie doesn't do her own laundry, does she?" Her smile was razor thin. "Well, I can't keep track of everyone's mess around here." She took up her cup of tea and walked away, leaving my garments in a crumpled heap. I understood what she was doing. She expected me to react and raise a scene, but I wasn't going to give her that satisfaction. She only prepared enough food for 3 people for dinner that night. I hadn't realized until I got to the table and saw 3 plates, one for her, one for Dad, and one for Sophie. She looked up at me and said, "Oh, Riley, I thought you were eating out tonight." "You didn't say anything." "I live here," I responded calmly. "You didn't ask." She shrugged and smiled with a phony sweetness. "Well, there's bread in the pantry if you're hungry." I sat there for a moment, contemplating walking away or possibly flipping out on her. But instead, I grabbed my coat and fled. I couldn't stand sitting across from them for another second. I ended up at the neighborhood diner, eating a sandwich alone and texting one of my old high school buddies. "Please let me know if you're free tomorrow. I need to get out of the house." The next day, I contacted my friend Jasmine. She still lived close, and when I informed her about the situation, she gave me that wide-eyed expression you get when you can't believe what you're hearing. "Wait, they're living in your house, acting like you're the guest? Riley, what the hell?" "I don't know what to do," I admitted. "Dad's too much of a coward to tell Brenda the truth, and she's trying to make my life miserable. I feel like I'm losing my mind." We spent the afternoon chatting and catching up on life, and for a few hours, I felt nearly like myself again. Jasmine laughs. "If she keeps pushing, I'll come over and put her in her place for you." It made me laugh. But when I arrived home, the fear crept back. The house was dark and quiet. I turned on the hallway light and discovered something strange. My shoes, which I had neatly placed by the door, had been moved into the coat closet. It was a minor detail, but it conveyed a strong message. Brenda did not want any traces of me evident in her space. Over the next week, she doubled down. I'd wake up to discover my belongings shifted around, such as my coffee mug being suddenly placed to the back of the cabinet, or my mail being unintentionally thrown into a pile of rubbish. One morning, I went to take a shower, only to discover that the hot water was ice cold. Sophie had cleverly had a 45-minute shower just before me. Brenda made a show of saying, "Oh, Riley, I guess you'll just have to get up earlier. Sophie's growing, and she takes longer these days." The worst part was seeing Sophie change. When we were younger, she would follow me around like a little shadow. She'd call me big sister and beg me to braid her hair. Now, every time I went into the room, she rolled her eyes and said things like, "She's so lazy, Mom." I actually overheard her on the phone saying, "I don't know why she's still here. It's not even her house." That stung more than I want to admit. And then there was Dad. I swear, I could feel him avoiding me. He'd come home late or leave for walks whenever Brenda started teasing me in front of him. If I caught him alone and tried to discuss it, he'd just mumble something about keeping the peace. For whom is the peace being kept? Brenda moved Mom's favorite vase, which set me off. The beautiful ceramic vase with blue flowers painted on it had been on the mantel for as long as I could remember. When I got home one day, I discovered it tucked away on a random shelf in the corner. In its place was one of Brenda's awful rustic items, an ugly wooden sign that read, "Home, home sweet home." I asked her about it directly. "Why did you move the vase?" "Oh," she replied, not glancing up from her tablet. "I just thought it didn't match the new style I'm going for here. I'm sure you understand." I did not respond, but I felt something break inside me. That vase was more than simply decoration. It was a piece of my mother's memory, and Brenda had no right to touch it. That night, I began packing up Brenda's belongings. In my head. I wasn't ready to act yet, but I knew I couldn't keep living this way. By Saturday morning, I felt as if I were living in someone else's home, an unwanted guest in my own. Brenda's animosity had become so intense that even coming into the kitchen felt like entering enemy territory. I avoided the communal areas while she or Sophie were present just to save my sanity. That morning, however, something was wrong. I awoke to silence. Complete silence. There was no sound of Brenda slamming pots in the kitchen, Sophie blasting pop music from her room, or Dad viewing the morning news on television. It was eerie. At first I assumed they'd gone out for breakfast or something, but the house seemed abandoned. It was excessively clean. The kitchen countertops were pristine, the dining table was bare, and even the shoes that were constantly piled near the front entrance were gone. I stood there, barefoot and still in my jammies, my stomach sank. I checked my phone for nothing. No texts or missed calls. I tried contacting Dad first. Go straight to voicemail. That is bizarre. I tried him again. The same result. By this point, I had a feeling that something was wrong. Maybe it was paranoia from weeks of stress with Brenda, but I couldn't shake the sensation that this wasn't just any ordinary Saturday morning. Finally, I called Brenda. I was about to hang up after the fourth ring when she answered. Her voice was harsh. "What do you want?" Her tone took me completely off guard. I just wanted to know where everyone is. I woke up and the house was empty." She laughed. And not just any laugh. But a cruel, hideous sound that made my skin crawl. "Oh, didn't we tell you? We're in the Maldives. You know, sunny beaches, luxury resorts, the whole deal." I blinked, clutching the phone more tightly. "What? The Maldives? First-class flights and everything," she said with a faux cheer. "We didn't mention it because, frankly, we didn't want you tagging along. You're not exactly in the position to pay your way, are you?" My stomach sank. "What are you talking about?" That's when she abandoned the act entirely. "I'm talking about you living in our house like some entitled brat," she said with anger. "Your father might be too soft to say it, but I'm not. You're a freeloader, Riley. You've been mooching off us long enough. Do you know how embarrassing it is to have a grown woman squatting in our house while we're paying all the bills?" I could hardly breathe. My hands shook, and I slumped onto one of the kitchen chairs, my legs unable to support me. "It's not your house," I choked out. "It's my house." She ignored me. "We're done, Riley. When we get back, I want you gone. I don't care where you go to sleep on a park bench for all I care, but you're not staying here." If you're still in that house when we come back, I'll personally throw you out." In the background, I could hear Sophie giggling and Dad saying something I couldn't understand. The sound of it twisted the knife farther. "Brenda, you don't bother trying to call your father," she said, her voice frigid. "He agrees with me. He's just too weak to tell you himself. We've already blocked your number. Have a nice life, Riley." Then she hung up. I sat there stunned, the silence of the house pushing down on me. I gazed at the phone, half expecting her to call back and explain it was a terrible prank, but she didn't. My father's silence on the other end was sufficient to confirm everything. They were gone, on vacation, living it up on a tropical island while sitting alone in what was supposed to be my home. And the worst part? They intended to toss me out when they returned. For the first few minutes, I sat there with my mind blank. I couldn't process it. I couldn't believe my dad and my own father had allowed this to happen. He did not stop her. He did not stick up for me. Or he simply went along with it. But the shock did not last long. It transformed into something else. Something I had not felt in weeks. Rage. Did they want me gone? Fine. But they'd neglected one crucial detail. This was my residence. I spent the next hour sitting in that chair, staring at the walls and repeating the conversation in my mind. Brenda's voice reverberated repeatedly. "Freeloader, squatter, embarrassing." Not only did she say it, but she said it in such a way that I felt like a useless parasite clinging to their lovely life, as if I didn't belong here. Well, I wasn't about to let her win. By lunchtime, I had devised a plan. First things first, I blocked their phone numbers. I didn't want to hear a word from any of them, including Dad. Then I contacted the locksmith. Emergency service. The person inquired as to when. I described what I required. "Yes," I replied, attempting to keep my voice steady. "As soon as possible." The locksmith arrived that afternoon, an elderly man with nice eyes who didn't ask too many questions. He changed the locks on all of the doors in the house, including the front, back, and garage. It cost more than I wanted, but I didn't mind. "Anyone else have keys to these doors?" he said as he handed me the fresh set. "Not anymore," I said. Once the locks were changed, I grabbed some rubbish bags and boxes and began packing their belongings. I was done pretending that everything was all right. If Brenda and Dad believed they could walk back into my house after treating me like garbage, they were mistaken. I went room to room. Brenda's pricey clothing are packed. Her pricey bathroom goods pile up on the counters and into a bag. Sophie's toys, school supplies, and whatever else she had left laying around were all boxed up. Dad's golf clubs, which he never uses but constantly brags about possessing, went right into the garage. By the time I finished, the sun had fallen and the garage was filled of their belongings. It was exhausting, but it felt great. As if I were regaining what was mine, piece by piece. I sat on the couch that night, staring at the clean, empty area that had been occupied for years. It felt odd. Quiet. However, it felt like home again. That night, I got the best sleep I'd had in weeks. The next morning, I awoke with a sense of peace that I had not had in a long time. I made myself a cup of coffee, sat in Mom's old chair, and watched the sun shine through the window. I knew it was just the beginning. Brenda was not about to let this go without a fight, and Dad, well, I had no idea what to anticipate from him anymore. But one thing was certain. I wasn't going anywhere. The storm hit on Friday evening. I had expected it, honestly. I had spent the entire week mentally preparing for the explosion that would undoubtedly occur once they returned and saw what I had done. I even rehearsed what I was going to say several times to avoid stumbling or giving them an opportunity to influence me. That afternoon, I had returned home from work, left my bag by the entrance, and noted how quiet the house was. It wasn't the eerie, empty silence I'd experienced the morning after Brenda's call. No, this was the kind of silence that felt appropriate. It felt like tranquility. My tranquility. I had just sat down with my laptop to check emails when I heard the car turn into the driveway. The sound of tires crunching on gravel turned my stomach, but I forced myself to remain calm. I didn't move from my seat on the couch as I heard doors smash, footsteps pounding up the walkway, and Brenda attempting and failing to unlock the front door. She began beating on it instantly. "Riley!" Her voice was already harsh. "Riley, what the hell is going on? Why won't the door open?" I let her hammer for another 30 seconds before standing up, taking the fresh keys off the counter, and walking to the door. I took my time unlocking it, enjoying the little break in her screams. When I finally answered the door, I was met by Brenda's outraged expression. Her hair was tangled, her cheeks flushed, and she looked like she was about to bite my head off. Behind her, Dad stood stiff and uneasy, his gaze elsewhere. Sophie hung back near the car, arms crossed and scowling. "What did you do?" Brenda shouted, pushing her way past me into the entranceway. "Why did you change the locks?" I stood aside, allowing her to storm in. Dad followed silently, his shoulders stooped to avoid my gaze. Sophie trailed behind him, clutching her phone like a lifeline. Brenda quickly turned on me. "I want an explanation. Right now." I crossed my arms and faced her look without flinching. "It's pretty simple," I said. "This is my house. You don't live here anymore." Her jaw dropped open as if I had hit her. "Your house?" "Yes, my house. The house my mom bought. The house she left to me. The one you've been living under a lie for the last 4 years." For a single second, the room fell silent. Brenda gazed at Dad, her face filled with perplexity and increasing rage. "What is she talking about?" Dad didn't respond. He simply stood there, frozen. I turned to him, my tone stern. "Tell her, Dad. Tell her the truth." Brenda turned to face him. "What truth? What is she saying?" Dad whispered something I couldn't understand, his voice so low I assumed he was choking on his own shame. "Speak up," Brenda demanded. "What is she talking about, Mark?" Dad eventually looked up, his face pallid. "It's true," he said, his voice wavering. "The house? It's not mine. It never was. Laura bought it before we were married. She left it to Riley in her will." Brenda gazed at him for a second, blinking as if she couldn't absorb what he was saying. Her face became a deep shade of red. "You lied to me." Dad flinched as if she'd hit him. "I didn't mean—" "You told me this was your house," she exclaimed. "You said you let Riley stay here out of the goodness of your heart. Do you have any idea how stupid this makes me look?" Her voice was loud enough that I was confident the neighbors could hear, but I didn't mind. Let her scream. Let her have her tantrum. I'd spent weeks feeling like a stranger in my own house. She could handle a little reality. Brenda returned to me, her eyes flaming. "You ungrateful little brat. After everything we've done for you." I shut her off. "Everything you've done for me? Like what? Trying to erase my mom from this house? Calling me a freeloader? Planning to throw me out? That's not helping, Brenda." She opened her lips to argue, but I hadn't finished. "Your stuff is in the garage, take it and leave." Sophie finally spoke up. "Mom, let's just go." Her voice was subdued, and for the first time, I noticed something other than anger in her discomfort, perhaps. She glanced at me for half a second before turning away. Brenda ignored her. "We are not leaving," she snarled. "This is our home too." "No, it's not," I replied, my voice firm. "It's mine, and I want you out." Dad finally went forward, as if he wanted to resolve everything with a single sentence. "Riley, please," he asked, his voice trembling. "We don't have anywhere to go right now. Just give us a few weeks." I held up my hand. "No." His face crumbled. "Please, sweetheart. I know I messed up, but we're family." "Family doesn't treat each other like this," I responded. "You let this happen. You let Brenda think this was her house. You let her treat me like garbage. And you stood there and said nothing." Dad had nothing to say about that. He simply gazed down to the floor, like a chastised child. Brenda, on the other hand, was not prepared to quit up. "You're a selfish little girl," she snarled. "You think you're so high and mighty because of this house. You wouldn't even have it if it weren't for your father." I laughed bitterly. "My father had nothing to do with this house. Mom bought it with her own money before you or him were even part of the picture. She made sure it would be mine because she knew I couldn't count on him." That silenced her. I turned back to face Dad. "You can take your stuff and leave. I'm done with this." For a minute, no one moved. Brenda looked at me as if she wanted to leap at me, but Dad eventually nodded, his shoulders slumping in defeat. "Fine," he muttered. It took them almost an hour to get their belongings into the car. Brenda didn't stop. She mumbled under her breath the whole time, calling me names and yelling about how ungrateful I was. Dad just appeared hollow. Sophie remained silent, helping to carry things without saying anything. When they were finished, Dad knocked on the door one final time. I did not open it. Brenda's voice could still be heard faintly through the glass as they drove away. The home became quiet again. It felt like it belonged to me when they left for the first time in years. Like it belonged to Mom. I sat down on the couch and exhaled a breath I had not realized I was holding. They were gone. Finally, it has been 2 months since that day. Dad still calls from various numbers, but I don't answer. Some relationships cannot be repaired, and I honestly don't want to. I'm currently focused on myself. My job is excellent. I've made pals at work, and I'm gradually recovering from all of this. I planted new roses in Mom's garden that she would have adored, and I am now at peace. To anyone who is dealing with a toxic family, sometimes you need to let go. You do not owe anyone your tranquility, especially those who take advantage of you. Mom made certain that I would always have a home. My family abandoned me in the wilderness to teach me independence. But I made the news, police got involved, and now they're begging for help. I am Rachel Monroe, a 28-year-old single mother of the most lovely young girl in the world. My family has always had this bizarre dynamic in which they believe I am too soft and need to toughen up. My parents, Leonard and Patricia, are both retired military, and my older sister Vanessa, 32, who is married to Greg and has 2 children of her own, has always been the perfect child. The invitation arrived 3 weeks before the trip. Vanessa called me on a Thursday evening as I was assisting Lily with her homework. "Hey sis, we're planning a family camping trip to Pine Ridge Mountain. You and Lily should come. It'll be good for her to spend time with her cousins, and you could use some fresh air instead of being cooped up in that apartment all the time." I should have realized something was wrong. Vanessa rarely invited me to family gatherings, and when she did, there was typically an underlying motive. But I was thrilled. Lily had been asking about camping for months after studying about it at school, and I felt it would be an excellent opportunity to bond with my family. "That sounds amazing. When are we thinking?" "Next weekend. Dad's already booked the campsite. It's got hiking trails, a waterfall, the whole 9 yards. We'll handle all the heavy camping gear. You just bring clothes and food for you and Lily." Red flag number 1. They were being overly helpful. My family never made it easy for me. Lily was quite excited in the days building up to the vacation. She packed and repacked her small rucksack, which contained her favorite stuffed animal, Mr. Bear, and about 15 coloring books. I purchased new hiking boots for both of us and spent far too much money at the outdoor store on what I thought were necessities. On Friday afternoon, we met at the designated parking spot at the base of Pine Ridge Mountain in Colorado. The campsite was approximately a 2-mile stroll up a well-kept trail. Vanessa and Greg arrived with their children, Landon, 8, and Avery, 10. My folks arrived in Dad's pickup, filled with camping goods. "Rachel, there's my adventurous daughter," Dad said, lifting me off the ground with his signature bear embrace. "Ready to rough it in the wilderness?" Mom was more restrained as usual. "I hope you brought appropriate gear, Rachel. This isn't exactly a hotel." "I've got everything we need, Mom. Thanks for organizing this." The trip up to the campsite was stunning. Lily held my hand for most of the way, chatting about every bird and flower we saw. Landon and Avery went ahead with their parents, while my parents followed, commenting on everything from trail maintenance to the weather forecast. The campground was wonderfully situated in a clearing surrounded by thick trees, complete with a fire ring, picnic table, and bear box for food storage. There was even a clean outhouse located approximately 50 yards distant. Dad and Greg successfully set up 3 tents. One for my parents, one for Vanessa's family, and one for Lily and me. They also set up a small tarp shelter to keep excess gear and supplies out of the elements. That first evening was just fantastic. We made hot dogs and s'mores over the campfire as the kids played flashlight tag. Lily fell asleep in my lap while Dad shared memories about his war days, and for the first time in years, I felt fully included in this family. Saturday morning began early. Lily woke me up at sunrise, full of excitement. "Mommy, can we go see the waterfall today? Uncle Greg said it's really pretty." I checked the time at 6:30 a.m. "Let's let everyone else wake up first, sweetheart." By 8 a.m., the entire camp was awake. Vanessa emerged from her tent looking like she had stepped out of a REI brochure, whilst I felt like I had been hit by a truck. Camping was certainly not my strong suit. "There's a beautiful waterfall about a mile down the Blue Trail," Dad stated during breakfast. "Perfect for a morning hike before it gets too hot." "Can Lily and I go check it out?" I asked her. "She's been talking about it since we got here." "Of course," Mom replied. "Take your time. We'll probably just relax around camp, maybe prepare lunch." This was red flag number 2, but I was too pleased by Lily's passion to notice. Lily and I departed at 9:30 a.m. The blue trail was well traveled and simple to follow, traveling through lush woodland with occasional views of the valley below. Lily paused to inspect every interesting rock and flower, making our 1-mile trip last an hour and a half. The waterfall was breathtaking, a 50-foot cascade that plunged into a crystal-clear pool surrounded by polished rocks. Lily instantly wanted to dip her feet in the water, so we sat on the rocks and let the mist cool us down. "This is the best trip ever, Mommy," Lily exclaimed, swinging her little legs through the water. "I'm so glad you're having fun, baby." We spent almost 2 hours at the waterfall. Lily collected smooth stones while I snapped what seemed like 100 shots. Around noon we began our journey back to camp, both of us in good spirits. That's when our idyllic family vacation turned into a nightmare. As we approached the campsite, I realized something was wrong. It was too quiet, no conversations or noises of people moving around. When we reached the final turn in the route, my heart stopped. The campsite was entirely empty, not just of people, but of everything. The tents, camping chairs, coolers, camp stove and bear box containing our food were all gone. Even the ashes from our campfire were spread and covered in dirt. Lily questioned, "Mommy, where is everyone?" Her voice was small and uncertain. I stood there in disbelief, unable to understand what I was seeing. My phone displayed no signal, which explains why I had not received any texts. Then I noticed a piece of paper weighted down with a rock on the picnic table. With shaky hands, I took the note. It was written in 3 different, familiar handwritings. In Mom's tidy cursive. "DD. You're too dependent on us. This is for your own good." In Dad's blocky print. "Time to grow up and stop expecting everyone else to take care of you." In Vanessa's flowing script. "Next time don't bother showing up. Otherwise figure it out yourself." At the bottom Dad wrote, "This will make you stronger. Trust the process." I read the note 3 times before it hit me. My family, including my parents and sister, had abandoned me and my 6-year-old daughter in the middle of the forest, leaving us with nothing except the clothing on our backs and what was in my day pack. Lily looked at me with wide, terrified eyes. "Mommy, what's wrong? Where did everyone go?" I had to convince myself to remain cool for her sake, but within I was breaking down. How might they accomplish this? How could they abandon a youngster in the wilderness? What if something happened to us? "There's been a change of plans, sweetheart," I managed to reply. "We're going to have a different kind of adventure." The first thing I did was take inventory of what we had. My day pack contained 2 water bottles, almost empty, some trail mix, Lily's stuffed animals, our phones have no service, a tiny first aid kit. I bought an emergency whistle but planned to never use it. First, pondered using the whistle, but we were too far away from other campers, and I didn't want to worry Lily any more than she already was. Lily had a little backpack containing coloring pages, crayons and a drink box. It was 12:30 p.m. on Saturday. We were 2 miles from the parking place where our car should have been if they hadn't stolen it as well. And the weather prediction had predicted thunderstorms that evening. The hike down seemed to take forever. Lily was exhausted and kept asking questions that I couldn't answer. Why did Grandma and Grandpa leave? Where did Landon and Avery go? When are we going home? When we arrived at the parking lot, I almost cried with relief. My car was still there with the keys stashed behind the rear tire, a habit I established after repeatedly locking myself out. But the relief was short-lived. When I checked my phone and finally had service, I found Vanessa's messages, which had been sent throughout the afternoon while we were trapped. My drive home was the longest 2 hours of my life. Lily fell asleep in her car seat, fatigued from both the hike and the emotional tension. I spent the entire drive alternately angry and heartbroken. How could my own family have done this to us? When we returned home, I finally had full mobile service and noticed many text messages from Vanessa, all of which were sent after they abandoned us. Hope you're learning something up there. This is what independence looks like. Maybe now you'll stop expecting everyone else to solve your problems. That night, once Lily was safely in her own bed, I sat in my kitchen and cried. Then I became angry. Then I began planning. But first, I needed to deal with the immediate aftermath. Lily awoke again that night from nightmares, weeping for Grandma and Grandpa. Each time, I had to console her while my own heart was aching, explaining that everyone makes errors. But we were secure now. Sunday morning, Vanessa texted, "Hope you slept well in your own bed. Maybe now you'll appreciate what you have instead of always expecting handouts." The nonchalant cruelty made my hands shake. I screenshotted the notification and saved it to a folder that I was already creating. I spent Sunday looking up all I could about what had happened to us. The campsite was in Jefferson County, Colorado, which has strict statutes against child endangerment. I discovered that abandoning a child under the age of 12 in a distant location without proper supervision can result in felony charges. The fact that they had confiscated all of our supplies made things considerably worse. I also began documenting Lily's emotional state. She was clingy, continually wondering whether we would be abandoned again. She would not let me out of her sight, even accompanying me to the bathroom. When I proposed we go to the playground, she pleaded, "You won't leave me there, Mommy." My heart broke again. This was more than just what they did to me. They also traumatized my daughter. On Sunday evening, I called my best friend Maya, who lived 2 states away. I was scared to tell anyone what had happened, but I needed someone to talk to. "They did what?" Maya's voice was so high that I had to hold the phone away from my ear. "Rachel, that's insane. That's not tough love, that's psychological torture. I keep wondering if I'm overreacting." Overreacting. Rachel, listen to me. If anyone else had done this to you and Lily, a stranger, an acquaintance, anyone, you'd call the police immediately. The fact that it's your family doesn't make it less criminal. Maya was a social worker, and her professional opinion held weight with me. What would happen if this case came across your desk? Immediate intervention. Investigation by Child Protective Services. Possible removal of the child from the home if the perpetrators had custody. This is textbook child endangerment, Rachel. That conversation was the turning point. I understood I wasn't being dramatic or overly sensitive. What my family had done was indeed abusive, and they needed to face the repercussions. I called in ill from work on Monday morning and spent the rest of the day making additional calls. I notified the Jefferson County Sheriff's Department and filed a report. Deputy Alvarez initially accepted my statement over the phone, and then requested me to come in that afternoon for a formal statement. "Ma'am, we see cases like this. Sometimes families thinking they're teaching lessons but crossing lines into criminal behavior. The fact that they took all the camping supplies and left you without resources makes this more serious." "What happens next?" "We'll investigate. I'll need you to come in and make a formal statement, and we'll want to interview your daughter if you're comfortable with that. We'll also contact the other parties involved." The thought of the sheriff's department contacting my parents and sister gave me a horrible delight. They wanted to teach me about the consequences that they were about to experience directly. Tuesday brought additional calls and research. I discovered that several other families had reported similar incidences of relatives abandoning family members in isolated regions as character-building exercises. The majority never filed charges, thus the habit persisted. I also learned about the psychological consequences of abandonment for children. I met with Dr. Melinda Cross, a child psychologist, who emphasized that Lily's experience could have long-term consequences. "A child her age doesn't understand the difference between a lesson and genuine abandonment," the pediatrician said. From her perspective, the people she trusted most in the world disappeared without explanation. That can create deep-seated anxiety and trust issues. But she seems to be bouncing back. Children are resilient. But they're also good at hiding their trauma to protect their parents. I'd strongly recommend some counseling sessions, both for her individually and for you together. As I spoke with more professionals, my resolve grew stronger. This wasn't about vengeance anymore. It was about safeguarding Lily and ensuring my family recognized the severe pain they had inflicted. Wednesday morning I got a call from Deputy Alvarez. "Miss Monroe, we've made contact with your family members. They've agreed to come in for questioning, but I wanted to give you a heads up. They're claiming this was all a misunderstanding." "A misunderstanding?" "According to your sister, they thought you knew they were leaving and that this was some kind of planned survival exercise. They say the note was meant to be motivational, not abandonment." The brazenness of their lies left me stunned. They're actually going to claim that abandoning us was a planned activity? "Deputy Alvarez, I have text messages from my sister after the fact that clearly show this was intentional. They knew exactly what they'd done." "That's helpful evidence, ma'am. Those messages definitely contradict their story. We'll be moving forward with the investigation." That evening, my phone rang with Mom's number. "Rachel, you need to stop this nonsense right now," she replied without explanation. "We've got police calling us, asking us to come in for questioning like we're criminals. This has gone too far." "Has it, Mom?" "Because from where I'm sitting, it hasn't gone far enough. We were trying to help you become more independent. You were trying to help by abandoning your granddaughter in a place where she could have been killed? Mom, do you realize there are mountain lions in that area? Bears? What if we'd gotten lost trying to find our way back in the dark? But you didn't. Because we got lucky. Because I kept my head and didn't panic. And because Lily trusted me to keep her safe. But what if I had a medical emergency? What if Lily had been injured? What if the weather had turned bad and we'd been stuck out there overnight? There was silence on the other end of the telephone. We never thought. Mom's voice sounded quieter now. That's the problem, Mom. You didn't think so. You decided to play God with our safety to make some point about my character, and you put a 6-year-old child at risk to do it. The police said you're pressing charges. I am. And unless you can give me one good reason why I shouldn't, I'm going to follow through with it. Mom hung up without saying another thing. Dad paid a visit on Thursday morning. He arrived at my flat after work, looking older and tireder than I had ever seen him. Can we talk? He inquired. I welcomed him in but did not offer him coffee or invite him to sit down. Rachel, I need you to understand something. In the military, we put people through tough situations to make them stronger. It's not meant to be cruel, it's meant to build character. Dad, I'm not a soldier. Lily is not a soldier. We're your family, and you put us in danger. I know it seems bad. It doesn't seem bad, Dad. It was bad. You committed a crime. Multiple crimes, actually. He sat down heavily on my couch, suddenly appearing to be 62 years old. What do you want from us, Rachel? I want you to understand that what you did was wrong. I want you to get help so you never do anything like this again. And I want you to face the consequences of your actions instead of trying to minimize them or blame them on your military background. You want us to go to jail? I want you to take real responsibility. Not this half-hearted, sorry you're upset nonsense. Dad looked at me for a long time. You've changed. Yeah, I have. Turns out I didn't need your wilderness survival course to become stronger. I just needed to realize I already was. Friday afternoon, I received a call from an unexpected source. Greg, Vanessa's husband. Rachel, I need to apologize, he stated abruptly. I had no idea what they were planning. Vanessa told me you all were doing some kind of team-building exercise, and I thought it sounded stupid but harmless. If I'd known they were going to abandon you and Lily, I would have stopped it. Did you know they were planning to leave us there? God, no. I thought maybe they were going to make you set up your own tent or cook your own food or something like that. When Vanessa came home Saturday, bragging about how they taught you a lesson, I was horrified. We had a huge fight about it. This was intriguing. What did she say exactly? She said you needed to learn that the world doesn't revolve around you and that maybe now you'd stop asking for help all the time. Rachel, I want you to know that's not how I see you at all. You're one of the strongest people I know. Raising Lily on your own and working so hard to provide for her. Greg's call gave me hope that not everyone in my extended family was cold-hearted. It also provided me with another perspective on Vanessa's mentality before the occurrence. Greg, would you be willing to write down what Vanessa told you about their plans and her reaction afterward? Absolutely. And Rachel, I'm supporting whatever you decide to do about this. What they did was unforgivable. Here's what my family didn't know about me. I wasn't as powerless as they assumed. Yes, I was a single mom who occasionally required assistance. Yes, I lived in a small apartment while working 2 part-time jobs to make ends meet. But I was not weak. And I was not going to let them get away with what they did. My family was likewise unaware that I had lately started dating someone. Troy is a private investigator specializing in corporate fraud investigations. We met through a common friend approximately 3 months ago and had been dating for about 2 months, so I hadn't yet introduced him to my family. When I contacted him on Sunday evening and informed him what had happened, he was furious. They abandoned a child in the wilderness? He asked, walking around my living room on Sunday evening. Rachel, this isn't just cruel, it's illegal. What if something had happened to you or Lily? I know, but they're my family. I can't. Just. Yes, you can. What they did was child endangerment at minimum, and I bet they broke some other laws too. Troy's comments sowed a seed in my mind. My family tried to teach me about independence. Fine. I'd demonstrate my ability to be self-sufficient. Monday morning, I phoned in sick from both of my jobs and spent the day studying. What my family had done was not only ethically reprehensible, but also criminal in several ways. Abandoning a child in a remote location is considered child endangerment. Taking camping equipment that I helped pay for could be deemed theft. The psychological trauma they had caused could be grounds for a restraining order. But I wanted something more rewarding than just legal ramifications. I wanted them to feel the same powerlessness and anxiety that Lily and I experienced. Tuesday, I began making phone calls. First, I called my Uncle Ron. Dad's brother who lived across the country but was always nice to me. I told him the entire tale, and he was horrified. Rachel, honey. That's not teaching you independence. That's abuse. Your dad and I may not always see eye to eye, but I thought he had more sense than that. Uncle Ron had connections. He had been a journalist for 30 years before retiring, and he still had contacts in the local media. When I said that I was thinking of going public with a story, he volunteered to help. This kind of story gets attention, Rachel. Family abandons single mother and child in wilderness is the kind of headline that makes people pay attention. Are you sure you want to go that route? I thought of Lily and how terrified and perplexed she had been. Yes. I'm sure. Wednesday, I contacted a lawyer who Troy had mentioned as a specialist in family law and personal injury cases. Janelle Ruiz heard my tale and quickly recognized the possibility of a case. What your family did could result in criminal charges, she explained. Child endangerment. Reckless endangerment. Potentially even kidnapping charges if they transported you to the location with the intent to abandon you there. I don't necessarily want them to go to jail, I told them. I just want them to understand what they did was wrong. Sometimes, the threat of legal action is enough to make people reconsider their behavior, Janelle told me. Let me draft some letters. Thursday, I spent the entire day documenting everything. I jotted down every detail. I could recall, got screenshots of Vanessa's text conversations, and even drove back up to Pine Ridge Mountain to picture the campground and obtain a statement from the camp host who remembered our party. When I told the camp host, an elderly man named Frank, what had happened, he was terrified. They left you and your little girl up there alone? He inquired, shaking his head. Ma'am, that's not right. We get bears up here, mountain lions sometimes. Weather can turn dangerous real quick. What if you'd gotten lost trying to find your way back? Frank volunteered to write a statement describing how he saw my family load up all of their camping goods and leave while Lily and I were at the waterfall. Wednesday evening, Greg. The beginning of my revenge plan's execution. I had gathered sufficient proof, met with enough professionals, and created adequate legal papers. It was time for my family to face the repercussions of their conduct. At 9 a.m., I contacted my parents' home. Dad responded on the third ring. Rachel. How are you doing, sweetheart? Learn anything from your little adventure? His nonchalant tone made my blood boil, but I kept my voice calm. Hi, Dad. Actually, I learned a lot. I learned that my family is capable of child endangerment, theft, and emotional abuse. Now hold on. No, you hold on. I'm calling to let you know that you have 24 hours to return every piece of camping equipment you took, apologize to Lily and me, and agree to family counseling. If you don't, I'm filing criminal charges against all three of you. There was silence on the other end of the telephone. Rachel, you're being dramatic. We were trying to help you. You abandoned a 6-year-old child in the wilderness, Dad. That's a felony in this state. Check your email in about an hour. I hung up and immediately called Vanessa. What the hell, Rachel? She said rather than saying, hello? Dad just called me freaking out about criminal charges. You're really going to involve lawyers because we tried to teach you some independence? You tried to teach independence by abandoning your niece in a place where she could have been hurt or killed? Vanessa, what if we'd gotten lost? What if there had been a medical emergency? What if the weather had turned bad? But none of that happened. Because we got lucky. You put Lily's life at risk to make some twisted point about me being too dependent. That's not teaching, Vanessa, that's abuse. You're overreacting. Am I? Check your email in an hour. We'll see if I'm overreacting. The emails I sent included copies of Janelle's formal notices of intent to bring criminal charges for child endangerment, theft, and reckless endangerment. I also shared Frank's statement and images from the camp. But legal threats were only the beginning. At 2 p.m. on Tuesday, the local news channel aired a story titled, Family Abandons Single Mother and Child During Camping Trip. Uncle Ron had come through magnificently. The piece featured interviews with child safety specialists, who detailed how harmful my family's lesson had been. By Wednesday evening, the story had garnered substantial attention on social media, with hundreds of shares and comments ranging from fury to astonishment. What kind of people abandon a child in the wilderness? This isn't tough love, this is child abuse. I hope these people are prosecuted to the full extent of the law. My phone began ringing at 6 p.m. First Mom, then Dad, and then Vanessa requested that I repair this and make it go away. I didn't respond to any of their calls. Thursday afternoon, the story had garnered enough traction to pique the interest of regional media outlets. Someone had recognized my family from a local news report, and their social media accounts were inundated with nasty messages. Vanessa's business, a tiny Greg Sitting Consulting, was receiving poor feedback. Dad's volunteer role with the local veterans organization asked him to take a step back until the problem was settled. Mom's reading club had advised her not to attend any sessions till further notice. At 5 p.m. Thursday, all three of them arrived at my apartment. "Rachel, you have to make this stop," Vanessa pleaded as I opened the door. "My business is being destroyed. Greg's boss is asking questions. The kids are hearing about this at school." "You've made your point," Dad said. "We get it. We made a mistake. Now call off the lawyers and fix this media mess." Mom looked like she had aged 10 years in a week. "Rachel, please. We never meant for anyone to get hurt." I looked at them standing at my doorway, and for the first time in my life, I felt like I had control over our connection. "Come in," I called. They sat in my living room, like children awaiting correction. Lily was at a friend's house, so we could converse openly. "You want me to make this go away?" I inquired. They all nodded enthusiastically. "Here's what's going to happen. First, you're going to replace every single piece of camping equipment that was taken, including the food. The receipt was $347, and I want cash. Second, you'll record a public apologetic video describing what you did and why it was wrong. Third, each of you will donate $5,000 to the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. Fourth, you're going to start family therapy, and Lily and I will decide if and when we want to participate." "Rachel, Vanessa began. "I am not finished. Fifth, you will respect my boundaries as an adult and parent. No more comments about my life choices, parenting, or need for assistance. And finally, you're going to understand that what you did wasn't teaching me independence, it was showing me that I can't trust you with my daughter's safety." Dad was the first to speak. "Rachel, I think we can work something out." "Dad, these are not negotiations. These are my terms. You have until Monday to decide. If you accept, I will urge the news stations to air your apologetic video, and I will withdraw the criminal accusations. If you do not agree, well, see you in court." They went without saying anything else. Friday morning passed quietly, and I spent the day with Lily, who seemed to be recovering from the trauma better than I was. Although children are strong, I still planned to get her some counseling just to be cautious. Monday morning, 8 a.m., my doorbell rang. Dad stood there with an envelope containing $100 and a signed apology. "We will meet your terms," he answered gently. "All of them." "What made you change your mind?" He appeared older than I had ever seen him. "Your mother couldn't sleep for a week. She kept worrying about what might have happened to you and Lily out there. Vanessa's husband threatened to leave her if she would not make things right. We messed up, Rachel. We messed up severely." The apology video was posted that afternoon, and the three of them sat together, looking awkward but earnest, explaining what they'd done and why it was wrong. Dad talked about how his military history had made him believe that harsh love was always the answer. Mom grieved and apologized for placing Lily in danger, and Vanessa revealed that her jealousy over what she regarded as my special treatment had clouded her judgment. But the video was only the start of their reckoning. Over the next few weeks, I received several calls about the story's influence on their life. Vanessa's biggest client, a local restaurant chain that had been using her Greg Sitting services for 3 years, terminated their contract, and several other clients followed suit over the next month, as word spread through the business community. Her company's online reputation suffered significantly, but it was not completely destroyed overnight. Dad's condition was similarly bad. The Veterans of Foreign Wars post, where he had volunteered for 15 years, requested him to temporarily step down from his leadership position. His Wednesday night poker club was hesitant to continue with him in attendance, and his reputation in the veteran community had suffered tremendously. Mom's social circle also distanced themselves from her. Her book club requested her to take a break from meetings. The church committee she had worked on for a decade suggested she stand down temporarily, and several of her long-term friendships became strained. "I fought for this country for 20 years, Dad said to me during one of our court-mandated family therapy sessions. Now I'm being treated like a criminal because I tried to teach my daughter some independence." "You're being treated like someone who endangered a child," Dr. Reynolds gently corrected. "Because that's what you did." Her book club expelled her after several members said they couldn't feel comfortable around someone who would abandon a grandchild. The church committee she'd served on for a decade asked her to step down. And her hairdresser, whom she'd been seeing for 20 years, suddenly had no available appointments. The solitude was terrible for all of them. But Vanessa took it the worst. She had formed her entire identity around being the successful sister, the one who had it all together. And seeing her career and reputation suffer was clearly upsetting. "I never meant for it to go this far," she wailed during a particularly stressful therapy session. "I just wanted you to see that you could handle things on your own." "By leaving me and Lily in the wilderness?" I asked Vanessa. "What if Lily had been stung by a bee and gone into anaphylactic shock? What if I had fractured my ankle on the trail? What if we met a wild animal?" But none of that occurred. We were lucky. I became tired of hearing that excuse. "You risked our lives to prove a point about my character. That's not tough love. It's Russian roulette." Dr. Reynolds stepped in before the confrontation could escalate. "Vanessa, I believe it is critical for you to understand that the outcome does not justify the risk. The fact that Rachel and Lily were not physically hurt does not justify what you did." The therapy sessions were very enlightening, as it became evident that my family's behavior was not just about teaching me independence, but also about their own worries and insecurities. Dad stated that witnessing my struggles as a single mother reminded him of his own father's failings. "My dad left when I was 8, he remarked solemnly. "I swore I'd never be like him. But then I saw you struggling, and I felt powerless. I figured if I could make you stronger, you'd never need someone as my mother needed my father." Mom admitted that she had always felt bad for not being more supportive when Lily's father departed. "I believed if I was too helpful, I'd allow you to remain weak. I believed letting you handle things alone would push you to mature." Vanessa's intentions were the most distressing to hear. "I was jealous," she said. "You got all the attention because you were struggling, and I felt invisible. I figured if you simply got your act together, maybe Mom and Dad would acknowledge my accomplishments for once." These confessions did not justify what they had done, but they did help me comprehend the warped reasoning behind it. They had let their psychological baggage cloud their judgment, and Lily and I had paid the price. For several weeks, I got scores of messages from other parents who had been abandoned or mistreated by their families in the name of tough love. One comment in particular remained with me. It came from a woman named Mara, whose mother had locked her out of the house overnight when she was 12 as punishment for missing curfew. "I spent hours sitting on the porch, afraid and cold, wondering whether she'd ever allow me back in," Mara wrote. "She eventually opened the door at 2 a.m. and informed me that I'd learnt my lesson about following rules. I'm 43, and I still dream of being shut out. What your family did to you was worse, but I understand that feeling of betrayal when the people who are supposed to protect you become the ones who hurt you." Messages like Mara's reaffirmed my determination to pursue penalties. It wasn't just about my family. It was about sending a message that such behavior was unacceptable, regardless of the connection or the intended lesson. The video received nearly as much attention as the original story, but this time, the comments were different. "At least they're taking responsibility. This is what real accountability looks like. I hope they learned something from this." But not everyone was pleased with only an apology. The district attorney's office received multiple calls seeking prosecution, and child advocate groups cited our incident as an example of why stricter laws were required to protect children from family members who claimed to be teaching lessons. The criminal charges were eventually lowered to misdemeanors when the district attorney considered their public apology, the family therapy commitment, and the fact that Lily and I were not physically hurt. They both received probation and community service. But the civil ramifications persisted. Vanessa's business took months to recover, but it finally stabilized. Dad's reputation in the veteran community was permanently harmed, but not completely ruined. Mom gradually repaired some of her friendships, but several relationships never fully recovered. The news cycle moved on to other events, and life gradually returned to normal. The best part of my revenge, however, was not the public humiliation or forced apologies. It was a difference in how my family handled me. For the first time in my adult life, they began asking rather than telling. When Lily needed new school clothes, Mom offered to help shop instead of criticizing my choices. When I mentioned looking for a better job, Dad offered to help with my resume instead of lecturing me on work ethic, and Vanessa began inviting me to family events without making passive-aggressive comments about my contributions. Dr. Reynolds, my therapist, helped my parents understand that their military-style parenting wasn't appropriate for civilian family dynamics. She helped Vanessa work through her resentment about perceived favoritism, and she helped me learn to communicate my needs without feeling guilty. Although the family therapy sessions were initially awkward, they helped us establish healthy boundaries. 6 months later, we attempted another family camping vacation, this time on my own initiative and in charge of the preparation. We went to a developed campsite with cabins, running water, and cell phone coverage. Lily had a great time, and nobody was abandoned. Through all of this, my connection with Troy got stronger. He saw me at my worst and helped me rediscover my strength, and when he proposed 8 months later, my family was overjoyed for us. They were pleased after I stated unequivocally that anyone who disagreed with my relationship might avoid the wedding. Lily, now 7, occasionally inquires about the camping trip where everyone went missing. I've explained in age-appropriate language that grown-ups make mistakes and hurt those they care about, but the important thing is that they learned from it and made improvements. "Did it strengthen you, Mommy?" she recently asked me. I considered it thoroughly before responding. It made me understand how powerful I already am, love. I only needed to believe in myself. Looking back, I don't regret how I handled the situation. My family crossed a line that could have had serious consequences, and they needed to understand that. The public humiliation, legal threats, and forced accountability were not just retaliation. They were necessary consequences for dangerous behavior. People sometimes need to face the repercussions of their acts in order to understand their influence. My family discovered that their form of harsh love was actually emotional abuse, and that endangering a child is never acceptable, regardless of the intended lesson. But more importantly, I realized that I didn't need their approval or their definition of strong. I was already managing life as a single mother, working numerous jobs and raising a wonderful daughter. I did not need to be toughened up. I needed to be supported and appreciated. The camping trip was supposed to teach me independence, but it taught me something more valuable: that I was already autonomous. And I was able to demand better treatment from those who professed to love me. My family intended to strengthen me by abandoning me in the wilderness. Instead, they strengthened me by demonstrating that I could fight back and win. Sometimes the finest vengeance is just refusing to tolerate undesirable behavior and having the fortitude to impose consequences. They asked me to trust the process. But it turned out that all I needed to do was trust myself. My mother abandoned me, took all my savings, then suddenly called asking me to pay $2,000 for her husband's stepdaughter's dorm room. My phone suddenly buzzed when I was in bed, minding my own business. It was my mother. I hadn't heard from her in months. So what did she have to say? She didn't say, "Hey, how are you doing?" Instead, she got right to the point. She needed $2,000 for my stepsister's dorm fees. Yes, you read it correctly. She didn't even check in, just made an abrupt demand for money. Backstory: why this is a big deal. Before you pass judgment, please allow me to explain why this is such a significant event. This isn't a typical family request. When I was 16, my mother married Mark, her new husband, and it was brutally obvious that he had no interest in me. Mark had 2 children of his own. Noah, 14, Lily, now 17. They were treated like gold from the time they entered the picture. Almost immediately, my mother began acting as if I did not exist. I understand that mixing families can be difficult, but she didn't even attempt to make it work. The stolen college fund. When I graduated from high school, my grandparents graciously gave me $22,000 to help with my future. It was the first time I had truly felt free. On top of that, I had saved another $2,000 from my part-time work, giving me a $24,000 cushion for college or whatever came next. Then, one day, I looked into my bank account. Every single cent was gone. I confronted my mother, convinced that it must have been an error. She was still a co-owner of my account because I hadn't transferred it over yet. She looked me straight in the eyes, without a sign of guilt, and said she had taken everything. Her reason? It was my punishment for not respecting her new husband and their children. Or, at the very least, some ambiguous crap she cooked up on the moment. I lost it. She had treated my future as if it were nothing. That money was for college, my life, and she just took it. So I did the only sensible thing. I packed my bags and moved in with my grandparents, the only people who seemed to be concerned about what I was going through. What happens after that? I seldom spoke with my mother. Years later, she crawls back, move forward a few years. I just graduated college and am still trying to figure out my life. My mother called unexpectedly. Why? To ask for $2,000 to help Lily pay for her private dorm room. It appears that living with a roommate would be too difficult for her. Seriously. What 17-year-old wants a private dorm room? What happened to just coping with your roommate like everyone else? I did not even hesitate. No way. Not happening. The guilt trip begins. And how did she respond? No is not something you can say. We are family. Are you really going to refuse to help? She seldom asked how I was doing. We hadn't spoken in months, yet she treated me like I was some kind of ATM, just useful for money. I went straight to the monetary request, as if I owed her something. I simply hung up. I wasn't going to suffer through another guilt trip. The entitlement is unreal, to be honest. The entitlement shocks, but does not surprise me. This is not the first time she has done anything like this. I could have easily gone unnoticed after Mark entered the picture. She went above and beyond for him and his children, whilst I was there. Growing up, she wasn't always this way. But the moment she married him, it was as if I did not exist. She stopped asking how I was doing, stopped attending my school events, and stopped loving. She neglected to invite me over for Christmas after I had already moved in with my grandparents. However, guess what? She faxed the card. I hope you are doing well, Mom. Love is what it is. Nothing like we miss you or sorry for everything, just a simple card. Her interests were looks rather than true motherhood. Now she has the audacity to call out of nowhere and ask me to finance the dorm fees for her stepdaughter. After everything she's put me through? Not sure, not likely. To be honest, it's quite depressing. I owe them nothing after she stole my savings, left me to fend for myself, and prioritized her new family. I once wanted to be in a relationship with her. I tried to contact you back then, hoping we might work things out. Still, every time, it felt like I was talking to a brick wall. Her new family occupied her so much that she had no time for me. Despite our years of silence, she suddenly expects me to hand up $2,000 as if we're close. It's annoying, but I suppose I shouldn't be shocked. Some folks don't change. They simply take and take, claiming ownership over whatever you have. But I have learned my lesson. I'm no longer that defenseless child, letting her walk all over me. I've moved on, started my own life, and I'm not going to let her guilt trip me into paying for anything. Following that call, I blocked her from everything, and, to be honest, it feels as if a huge weight has been lifted. I cannot live with such negativity in my life. She will find out quickly if she tries to contact me again. I am done being courteous. After hanging up with my mother, I understood that was it. I had made myself very plain. Error. A few days later, I was just lying around, trying to enjoy my weekend, when my phone called. It was her once again. I almost disregarded it. What positive outcome may this have? But something piqued my interest, perhaps the faint hope that she had returned, ready for a normal chat. She hadn't. With a note of smugness, she remarked, "Listen, I talked to Mark, and we came up with a new arrangement." I could almost see her patting herself on the back, as if she were about to provide me with excellent service. She went on. Lily definitely needs a private dorm room since sharing with others would make her uncomfortable. She apparently can only deal with shared toilets and roommates. Their great scheme? Lily would receive a lovely 2-bedroom apartment with her own bathroom. And who would they like to help fund the cost? Exactly, me. What is the total for the semester? $3,800. They said I should donate $1,000 per month. For a stepsister who hardly remembers me? They asked me to pay $1,000 a month for a room I would never visit. It was so ridiculous, I almost laughed. I asked her directly, "Why is this my problem?" She immediately went into full guilt trip mode. "You never gave anything to this family. It's time you give back. You have to correct your errors." Whose mistakes? I have not even handled them in this manner. Then Mom yelled at me for living off my grandparents, as if I were a freeloader. First and foremost, my grandparents invited me to remain with them after everything I'd been through with her. They wanted to help me get back on my feet. Meanwhile, she has done far more for her real family than she has for me. In her perspective, I owe her for every little thing she has done for me. She kept underlining how much I owed them for not being a part of the family anymore, as if her driving me out was entirely my fault. She made me feel like I didn't belong, and now she's making me feel awful about leaving that mess behind. Yes. But no thanks. My rage was seething at this moment. But rather than allowing her to drag me down into this pit of guilt and manipulation, I asked her one thing. When are you planning to pay me back the $44,000 you took from me in high school? She flipped out the second I said it. She began screaming, calling me unappreciative and self-serving. I did everything for you? And this is how you pay me back? Looking at the past and throwing it away? You never even recognized what I did for you, I replied plainly. You never even apologized for stealing that money. You are the one who owes anything here. But she wasn't listening. She kept yelling about how I had abandoned the family and how my inaction was jeopardizing Lily's future. Apparently, enrolling her at a public college with normal dorms would ruin her entire life. Sure. She will be completely fine. The truth is that she wasn't asking for aid. She demanded it. There was no please or could you help us out? It was simply an expectation that I would comply, as if it were my obligation to clean up after their actions. And let's not even get started on Lily acting as if she's too good for the standard college experience. I made it through college while sharing a tiny room with a stranger. I'd had enough. I'm not giving you a single penny, you can figure it out without me. Then I hung up. Once again, it felt like déjà vu. Not because of the money, but because of the overwhelming entitlement. A complete disregard for me, my life, and the limits I had established. My hands were shaking. I knew it was not over. Even as I hung up, I could see she wasn't going to let this go. My mother has always been the sort to persist until she gets her way. Later that evening, she confirmed me correct. She sent me a long guilt-ridden text, practically an essay, about how I was tearing the family apart, and how now that I'm generating money, I need to step up. As if I were some kind of prodigal child returning, expected to pay my dues. She kept insisting that I pay for my sins, and start contributing to the family? Honestly? That was ridiculous. But I didn't fall for it. Her capacity to manipulate reality and make me appear like the villain was nearly astounding. Years of dealing with her manipulative behavior had prepared me for this. I wasn't about to let her shame me into paying for something that had nothing to do with me. So I blocked her. Everything, telephone, social media, and email. She attempted to contact me in every manner possible. I just couldn't handle it anymore. I didn't want to wake up every day knowing when the next guilt trip was coming. Blocking her seemed like the only way to have some peace. It wasn't simple, however. I would like to say that blocking her felt like a clean break, as if I didn't care. But a part of me does. Part of me still wishes things had gone differently. That mom would one day truly consider me as a child rather than a walking financial account. I doubt it. I realize that's unlikely. She made her choice. I made mine. I still can't believe how brave she is. After everything she has put me through, she expects me to pay for her stepdaughter's expensive dorm room. After practically removing me from her life to focus on her real family. I will not allow her to bring me back into the circumstance. Right now, I'm living my own life and looking forward, not backward. I'm over the drama, the guilt trips, and acting as their financial safety net when money is tight. That is their problem. It is their responsibility if they cannot afford to pay their own costs. That is where I stand. I don't know if she will try to contact me again. But if she does, she'll immediately realize that I'm no longer playing along. I have more important things to think about than paying for someone else's pampered child to live in a fancy dorm. After blocking my mother, I thought that was it. My decision made obvious, and the continual strain from her calls and texts had vanished. Naturally, nothing is ever that simple for her. A few days later, just as I was feeling ready to move on, my phone lit up with a message from my Aunt Karen. Karen is the only member of Mom's family who has consistently been rational. So, I believed she was only checking in. Nope. Her message reads, "Hey, your mother has been calling me nonstop. She says you blocked her, and she's really upset. She wants to talk to you. I think you should hear her out." I about rolled my eyeballs out of my head. Hear her out? In actuality, my mother merely wanted money. But Karen has always been the sort to preserve the peace, so I wasn't surprised when she tried to mediate. What surprised me was how my mother had dragged her into this mess. I responded, "She's not offended, Karen. She's furious because I refused to give Lily money for her dorm." Karen tried to reason with me. "Maybe you should talk to her and set some boundaries." I told her unequivocally, the boundary is already set. I could tell she was uncomfortable being caught in the middle, so I tried not to vent my aggravation on her. "I'm not paying for anything. And I'm done with the guilt trips." She exhaled. "Just consider it, okay?" I assured her that I would think about it, but, honestly, there was nothing else to ponder. I was not about to give my mother the satisfaction of believing she could embarrass me into doing anything. I wasn't going to succumb. A few days later, I was walking home from work when I noticed her. My mother. Standing outside my apartment building, like a stalker. I had no idea how she discovered where I lived. Perhaps she hunted me down in another manner. Perhaps she received the address from Karen. Either way, she was present. She appeared irritated. As if she'd come to start a brawl. I paused in my tracks. What do you say when your mother shows up unexpectedly after you blocked her? I did not have time to sort it out. "We need to talk," she began, approaching me before I could pull out my keys. I exhaled. I was already fatigued by this confrontation before it began. I nearly laughed in her face. "Fine," I said. "But if this is about money, you're not getting a dime." She crossed her arms, obviously irritated by my tone. "I didn't raise you to be so disrespectful." "Respect? From the lady who took my money, put her new family ahead of me, and only called when she needed something? Is that what she's talking about?" I informed her calmly. "I owe you nothing, and I definitely don't owe Lily a private dorm room." Her expression contorted with rage, as if she couldn't believe I was standing up to her. "Lily deserves this," she snapped. That is when I lost my temper. "You think I should help? Because I'm doing well now? Are you serious?" I was snickering. "You took my college savings when I needed it. You didn't care about my future then. And now I'm supposed to care about hers?" She tried to cut me off, but I continued. "You hardly even invite me to family gatherings these days. You replaced me. And now you think I'm going to swoop in and save the day when things get tough? Absolutely not. Remember this? I am not a member of your new family." She just stood there silently. For a while, I believed I had finally reached her. That she would realize how ludicrous it all was. But no. Instead of responding, she said, "You've always been selfish. I tried to offer you a better life, and all you've done is throw it back in my face." Selfish. After everything she had done, she had the arrogance to label me selfish. I was not going to let her alter history. I was not going to let her paint herself as a victim. "You gave me nothing," I stated forcefully. "You borrowed from me. You took my time, my money, my peace. You chose them over me. And now you're living with the consequences. Deal with it." She moved closer, attempting to scare me. But I did not back down. Her voice was chilly. "You owe this family." "Lily owes you," I replied. "She is your daughter. Not mine." That was it. I owe them nothing. At that point, I realized that our relationship was beyond repair. It wasn't only about money. It was all about control. The idea that I had constructed a life apart from her, that I was no longer under her control, and that I no longer required her approval upset her. She was searching for anything to get me back in. When I turned to leave, she grabbed my arm. Before she could say anything else, I ripped my arm free, looked her in the eye and whispered, "Goodbye." Then I stepped into my building, leaving her standing out in the cold. She should not expect to be welcomed back. As soon as I went inside, a surge of emotions hit me: relief, resentment, and grief. It felt like I'd finally let go of something that had been weighing on me for years. Nonetheless, my mother remained with me. The woman who raised me, even if she didn't do it perfectly. Despite knowing I had done the right thing, I felt guilty. Not because I had walked away, but because I hadn't acted sooner. The truth was that I had not left my family. They'd left me behind. Later that evening, Karen texted me. "What happened?" I gave her the shortened version. She responded, stating she hoped we might work things out someday, even though she understood and disagreed with Mom's actions. I didn't have the heart to tell her the truth. I was done. That some huge reconciliation down the line was not going to occur. Instead, I simply said, "Thanks." And that was all. For the first time, I acknowledged that there was nothing left to fix. For the first time in my life, I had fully prioritized myself. It was not easy. But that was the correct decision. I believed it had finally ended. That my fight with my mother outside of my flat had resolved things. That I had made it obvious. I had no intention of giving in, and I would not pay for anything. At the time, I assumed we had just had our final major blowout. Wrong. Things are never easy when you have a mother like mine. Approximately a week later, I received a call from an unknown number. Normally, I ignore them. But for some reason, I chose to respond this time. When I heard the voice on the other end, I recognized it as Mark, my stepfather. I hadn't heard from him in years, so I assumed he was trying to settle things. He was equally enraged as my mother. He did not waste time greeting people or making small talk. Instead, he launched right into accusations. "So, I heard you've been disrespecting your mother." I felt my jaw tightening. My instinct was to hang up, but curiosity got the best of me. I wanted to see how far they would go with this. I kept my voice even and said, "I'm not disrespecting her, I'm simply not giving her money." He gave a sarcastic laugh. I could almost hear him roll his eyes. "You think this is about money? This is about family? Here we go again." You abandoned your family. And now you're neglecting Lily when she needs you. I could feel my patience slipping, but I kept my voice calm. Look, I didn't abandon anyone. You pushed me out years ago, and Lily is not my responsibility. There was a pause. For a brief moment I hoped he'd finally understand. Of course, he didn't. You're selfish, he said, his voice full of hate. We've done everything for you, and how do you repay us? By turning your back on Lily and your mother? I almost laughed aloud. Everything? When their lovely little family was complete, they rejected me. They stole from me, neglected me, and treated me as an afterthought. I'd had enough. You did nothing for me, I responded, my voice crisp and firm. You took from me. Once you had your new family, you both acted like I didn't exist. My mother stole my money, and now, suddenly, I'm the one who's supposed to make things right. Before I could finish, he cut me off. You're not a kid anymore. It's time to stop acting like one. Family is about sacrifice. You owe this family. That word, owe, set me off. I owe them nothing. With my patience fraying, I shot out, no, Mark. I don't owe you a damn thing. I could hear his fury increasing, but I didn't mind. They owed something. They treated me as if I were disposable for years. I was done playing nice. I was no longer that youngster who could be walked over. I was not going to sit there and let him or my mother guilt trip me into accepting responsibility for their problems. This isn't over, he added, his voice low and almost threatening, as if he hoped to terrify me into changing my decision. I did not even bother responding. We're family, he added. And we'll always be family, whether you like it or not. I hung up. And as soon as I did, I felt a sense of relief flood over me. It felt as if I'd finally closed the door on something toxic. I had drawn a line. There was no going back now. However, that was not the end of it. A few days later, I received an SMS. From Lily. She was now getting involved too. Though her message was less harsh than Mark's or my mother's, there was still a lot of guilt tripping. She wrote, "Hey, I know things have been tight, but I really need help with this dorm situation." I looked at the message and shook my head. Not sure why you're acting so tough about it. It's just money, and it's not like you can't afford it. It's only money. The entitlement was ridiculous. She believed I owed her something, as if I were some wealthy uncle who could afford to grant her every dream. For a time, I pondered responding. But, honestly, what was the point? They had never listened before. She was not going to listen now. They were all in their own little world, and I was the villain simply because I did not satisfy their standards. So I removed the message. I also blocked her. They were never going to view things my way. No matter what I did, they saw family as a one-way street. They took. They never gave. And when I refused to give, I suddenly became the terrible person. However, they were no longer my family. Not truly. Family should be based on mutual respect, love, and support. They had none of that for me. To them, I was just a tool, someone to manipulate with guilt until I gave them what they desired. And yes, it hurt. But I was not going to let the pain control me anymore. Once I would have done anything to get their acceptance. I just wanted to feel like I belonged. But the time has passed. I was no longer a desperate child. I'd created my own life. I did not need their approval. I did not need their approval. Over the next few days, I found myself thinking about what family really meant. It's easy to get caught up in the concept that family means everything. The blood is thicker than water. However, sometimes the people who share your DNA are the ones who harm you the most. And when that happens, you have to make a decision. Do you continue to let them damage you simply because they are family, or will you walk away? Even if it means severing ties with those who should love you unconditionally. I decided to walk away. And yeah, it was difficult. But that was the correct decision. I refused to allow them to pull me down any longer. That night, as I laid in bed, I experienced something I had not felt in a long time. Peace. For once, I wasn't awaiting the next phone call. The upcoming guilt trip. The next request for money. For the first time in years, I felt liberated. And to be honest, it felt fantastic. A few weeks passed without any further problems. I was working, going out with friends, and just living my life. For the first time in a long time, everything seemed normal. Then one day, after work, I discovered a note in my mailbox. There's no return address. Just my name on the front. At first, I considered tossing it. But something about it felt odd. So I opened it. And guess who it came from? My mother. But this wasn't a card. This is not an apology. Not even an ordinary letter. This was a legal notice. She actually attempted to take me to court. Over what, you ask? Familial responsibilities. Apparently, Mom had concluded that I was financially liable for Lily's college fees. Because we are a family. And she was attempting to present it as some type of legal responsibility. As if I was obligated by law to pay for Lily's dorm. I stood there and read it. And then, I laughed out loud as I stood in my living room, holding this absurd letter. It seemed like a joke. It was so outrageous, so absurd. But this was not a joke. She had indeed consulted a lawyer. She had them prepare a full document, claiming that I owed her money. The letter was full of legal language about how family must assist family and how I was morally required to step in, given my so-called success. Success? I was 23, fresh out of college, still sorting out my life, and barely able to pay my rent. She talked about me as if I was sitting on stacks of money. As if I had limitless resources and was being terrible by refusing to share them. But even if I were wealthy, if I had all the money in the world, that doesn't mean I owed them anything. Especially not after how they treated me. I immediately phoned my grandparents. They were as startled as I was. Grandfather was upset. "Don't you worry about anything," he said. They contacted a lawyer buddy, who informed me there was no legal basis for what my mother was attempting. "We'll take care of this. Courts don't enforce family guilt trips." After a few legal processes, the issue was settled. When my mother realized she had no case, she simply dropped the whole affair. Since then, I have not heard from her. Not from Mark. Not from Lily. And honestly, it seems like a weight has been lifted from my shoulders. For years, I allowed them to control my life via guilt and manipulation. But now, for the first time, I'm completely free. Looking back, I am glad I stood my ground. Yes, it was hard. It was difficult for me to leave my own family. But that was the correct thing to do. Family is meant to be about love and support. Not about utilizing each other whenever it is convenient. I'm not sure what the future holds. But one thing is certain, I will never allow them back into my life, not after all they've done. Do I wish that things had turned out differently? Of course. But, at the end of the day, you must maintain your peace. And sometimes that entails walking away, even from those who are meant to love you most. And that's fine. On my own terms, I'm moving forward. My parents forced me to lose weight for my sister's wedding, but after my transformation, they couldn't handle my success. Growing up, I was always an overweight child. I've always been bigger than the majority of the other kindergarten students. While my peers were still figuring out what made them distinctive, my size had already stood out. As I grew older, the weight I carried became more visible. By high school, I was indisputably overweight, and my shape and girth served as a continuous reminder of my differences. College was not much different. While some of my peers began to find who they were or explore new aspects of themselves, I stayed stuck in the same identity, overweight and occasionally fighting with it. It wasn't easy being the bigger kid. It exposed me to continual ridicule, mockery, and nasty comments from people who didn't know or cared to understand me. Growing up, I was bullied more than I care to recall. Classmates teased me mercilessly. Their insults ate away at me, creating profound doubts and self-doubt that felt impossible to overcome. They'd call me names, tell cruel jokes, and I'd frequently be the punchline. I was always singled out, as if I were somehow unworthy of affection or companionship. I was continually excluded from games, parties, and gatherings. It felt like I was always on the outside, watching everyone else go through the regular ups and downs of childhood and adolescence from a distance I couldn't reach. These years of bullying influenced how I perceived myself and responded to the world. I felt out of place with others, so I sought sanctuary in books. I lost myself in literature and stories that helped me escape my daily troubles. Books did not judge me. They did not ridicule me. I became known as the nerd, and I didn't like it all that much. Bonnie, my younger sister, was very different from me. She was only a year younger than me and possessed an effortless charisma that drew others to her. Bonnie thrived in social situations, whereas I was shy and reserved. She had a fascinating personality. She could go into a room and instantly have everyone smiling, laughing, and absolutely fascinated by her. Bonnie didn't just make friends easily, she seemed to have an intrinsic ability to persuade people to support her, almost as if she were the sun around which everyone gravitated. Regardless of our differences, I adored her. I took my job as her older sister seriously, feeling fiercely protective whenever she needed it. When she began attending the same high school as mine, I was overjoyed. Initially, being Bonnie's older sister made me feel proud, as if I had a particular place in her life. However, as she grew older, things began to alter. As Bonnie settled into high school and began to create her own personality, I saw a difference in how she perceived me. She began to see how different we were, and how differently we were treated. Whereas I was the bookish, quiet kind, she was vivacious and popular, someone who rapidly established herself among the cool circle. I observed as she became aware of my eccentricities and insecurities, which had previously made me appear uncool. Bonnie began to distance herself from me as she found new pals. She would then try to actively ignore or avoid me in school. That hurt. It genuinely pained me that my own sibling saw me as inferior. Nonetheless, I did my best to accept her decision and give her the distance she appeared to require, even though it hurt to think I was losing not only my sister but also a friend. But, gradually, Bonnie stopped ignoring me and began to associate with others who made me feel like an outcast. Bonnie and her pals would take advantage of any opportunity to humiliate me whenever we met in the corridors or at lunch. They'd taunt me in front of other students or, worse, try to trip me as I passed with my lunch tray, just to make everyone laugh. It felt like I was losing her, not to new people, but to the same taunting and abusive conduct I'd been subjected to for so long. I was always on guard, attempting to avoid not just my peers' criticism but also the humiliation inflicted by my own sister. It hurt a lot, especially because it came from someone I had always admired and looked up to. When Bonnie invited her friends over, they would all gang up on me at home. They would rush into my room without knocking, then laugh and gesture to my body. They'd fling insults like geek and fatty at me like they were nothing. I felt like a zoo animal, as if I were their source of entertainment. When they entered my personal space in my room, I felt small and alone, as if I were an alien in my own home. I tried to explain it to my parents several times, hoping they would realize how tough it was for me to deal with Bonnie's conduct. But every time I brought it up, they dismissed my worries. They'd smile and defend her acts, claiming that this is how siblings bond, that Bonnie was only playing around with me. They told me it was harmless, even suggesting that I loosen up and stop taking everyone's taunts so seriously. They told me that I was older and should be more patient and resilient. So, not only did I face years of bullying from my peers, including my own sister, but my concerns were repeatedly rejected by my parents. It made me feel isolated, as if no one in my own family realized or understood how deeply it hurt. The only time I ever felt properly noticed by our parents was when I received my grades. Academics had always come effortlessly to me, and I became accustomed to receiving high grades. In a way, it was the one area where I felt superior to everyone else. It was also the one way I could make my parents proud, the one part of my life that they appeared to actually care about. My parents enjoyed bragging about my accomplishments to friends and relatives, portraying me as the family scholar, as if my grades were evidence of their parenting prowess. But Bonnie detested the analogies. She was not an academic overachiever, nor did she want to be, but our parents' repeated reminders of my accomplishments made her resentful. They put my grades up as an example, meaning that she needed to do the same. I could always tell she was frustrated and angry, which is probably why she did what she did to me. Bonnie would occasionally attempt to destroy my hard work in order to get back at me. She would sneak into my room in the middle of the night and grab my homework, often just before a major task was due. I'd wake up the next morning to find my perfectly completed work stolen. Panic would set in, and I'd feverishly hunt through my books, papers and files, becoming increasingly anxious with each passing minute. And there she'd be, smirking, watching me from the doorway, relishing every moment of my anxiety. To her, it was a minor victory, a way to bring me down a peg and remind me that I wasn't invincible. She understood how important my grades were to me, how much of my self-worth I had invested in them, and she enjoyed disturbing that aspect of my life. I only found out about her stealing my assignments years later, when she drunkenly admitted one evening. My relationship with Bonnie has softened over time, but we are still far from close. You could say we've matured a little, and some of the animosity from our youth has dissipated. However, the strong closeness that siblings often enjoy did not fully emerge between us. After graduation, I moved out and started a new life in a new city, with an interesting job and new chances, which meant I didn't see my family as much. As time passed, our communications became limited to occasional phone calls or texts. So, last year, when I scheduled a summer visit home, I was truly excited to see everyone. It had been a long time since we'd all gotten together as a family, and I was excited to catch up and reconnect. However, not everything went as planned. Our family lunch began well enough. Everyone appeared delighted to see me, and for a moment, it felt like old times. That changed, however, when Bonnie unexpectedly revealed her engagement. None of us saw it coming, and we initially assumed she was joking. However, it was instantly apparent that she was serious. She proudly put out her hand, displaying a gorgeous ring, and I couldn't help but remark how exquisite it was. I was genuinely happy for her, delighted that she had finally met someone she loved and who loved her back. Almost as soon as the congratulations subsided, Bonnie turned to me and inquired about my recent activities. I told her about my profession, my life, and how rewarding things had been for me. Before I could finish, she cut me off. "I can't help but say this," she started, smirking. "But why are you still fat? If your life is truly amazing, shouldn't you have shed weight by now?" Her remarks hit me like a slap, reawakening old insecurities that I thought I had overcome. The room became uncomfortably silent, and I could feel everyone's gaze on me, waiting to see how I would respond. I merely shrugged and tried to laugh awkwardly at her comment. But my parents immediately joined in to criticize me. They began discussing how I was still obese and unmarried, and how they were concerned I would never have children. I felt so mortified hearing them talk like that. My accomplishments, the work I was proud of, the life I had made for myself in another city, didn't seem to matter in their eyes. They were just concerned with my weight and the fact that I did not have my own family. As my parents and sister continued to talk about me, their comments wound deeper than I imagined. I had spent years eventually discovering myself, gaining confidence and freedom. But in those moments, I felt like the same nervous, awkward teenager I had always been, anxious for my family's acceptance and approval. My parents then applauded Bonnie for getting engaged before me and expressed their pride in her. To them, I was the inferior child, successful, but not quite enough. What was supposed to be a happy family reunion had swiftly turned into a heartbreaking reminder of old scars. At that point, I felt more like an outsider than ever. Bonnie did not stop. She continued to ask probing questions. "So, when are you getting married? Do you even have a boyfriend?" She was blatantly mocking me in front of everyone by bringing up my romantic life. My parents soon jumped on the subject, agreeing with Bonnie that it was past time for me to find someone before it was too late. They pointed out how Bonnie, being younger, was settling down before me, whilst I, the older one, was wasting my life away at work. I attempted to argue that I liked my life the way it was, that my work and freedom provided me with fulfillment. My career paid well, and I was passionate about it, so why did I need to meet a spouse or have a child to be happy? "I am content just the way I am," I informed them. But my words didn't appear to register. My mother, especially, appeared contemptuous. She gave me a sharp look and taunted me. "What's the point of earning all that money if you don't have anyone to come home to?" It was as if she couldn't believe that happiness existed outside of marriage or family. Sitting there, I had the typical feeling of being misunderstood. That my life choices were disregarded. This was my family, and they were supposed to know me best. However, they appeared to be preoccupied with a different definition of happiness than mine. I had come home seeking connection and warmth, but instead got judgment and taunts. Bonnie then smirked and added, "I expect you to at least have a +1 by the time my wedding rolls around." She chuckled and kept going. "I don't want people thinking my sister is some old miserable woman all alone while I'm getting married." The comment stung. I simply shook my head and assured her I'd try. That's when my folks spoke out again, matter-of-factly. "Bonnie's wedding is almost a year away. Even if you can't find a partner, you could at least try to lose weight and look more presentable for her wedding." They suggested that if I reduced weight, it would be simpler for me to attract a partner. Bonnie enthusiastically agreed with them. "Yeah, I want you to lose a few pounds at least," she remarked nonchalantly, as if she was doing me a favor. I sat there, astonished and humiliated, with an aching that I hadn't felt in years. How could my relatives talk to me like this? Did I truly deserve their hateful words simply because I was overweight? Was I not meant to have feelings because I was fat? I was a normal person, just like them. I functioned like everyone else. I never considered my weight as an impediment, so why did they? I'd even dated men who liked me just the way I was, but my parents and Bonnie made it sound like my weight was preventing me from finding love or men approaching me, which wasn't even true. I wanted to defend myself and tell them how terrible their statements were, but I felt frozen, unable to find the correct words. Their statements took me back to high school, to the agonizing times when my weight made me a target. I despised how nonchalantly my family brought up my deepest concerns without considering how they made me feel. So I sat there, holding in my pain, and let the topic go to anything else. When I returned home from my trip to see my family, I pushed myself into reducing weight with a zeal I had not realized I possessed. It began as a way to prove something to my family, but it gradually grew very personal. I joined a gym, followed a rigorous diet, and even hired a personal trainer. My trainer has been a lifesaver. After going through her own change from overweight to healthy weight, she knew just how to assist me through a path tailored particularly for me. She created a routine specific to my goals and encouraged me every step of the way, reminding me to give myself grace when I stumbled. This time, everything seemed to click. I started losing weight steadily, and as the pounds came off, I felt lighter. Not just physically, but also mentally. For the first time in my life, I began to feel and appear different. My confidence increased quickly. I used to assume that decreasing weight wouldn't have much of an influence, but it has. People see me differently today. Strangers are nicer and more attentive. Friends and colleagues see me with fresh respect. I can't deny that this seems like a validation I've never gotten before. It's as if I've suddenly become more noticeable than I was before. My new body brought a new sense of style. I overhauled my entire wardrobe, filling it with items I had only fantasized about wearing. I even opted for a full hair makeover, attempting a daring and trendy style that I would have been too afraid to try in the past. Perhaps it seems expensive, but I've never felt so good. I look in the mirror now and don't recognize the person staring back. It's like meeting a version of myself that I never knew existed. I'm proud of how far I've come, not just because I lost weight, but also because I gained confidence and self-assurance. With Bonnie's wedding just 2 weeks away, my family has invited me to fly down and join them for lunch next week to finalize the plans for her special day. But I don't feel like returning home. I don't want my family to ridicule me again or make me feel tiny, especially now that I'm finally feeling good about myself for the first time in a long time. I don't want to go to Bonnie's wedding anymore because of how she and my parents have treated me, but I know if I don't go, they'll be furious and give me a long lecture about how family is family and how, no matter how heartbroken I am, I must be present for Bonnie's big day. So, AITA, what happens if I do not attend my sister's wedding? Update 1. Wow, I'm overwhelmed by everyone's response. Some of your proposals are truly humorous. I can't believe you're encouraging me to show up and mess with my sister now that I've lost so much weight. Growing up as a fat kid had a negative impact on my self-esteem, particularly in terms of how I perceived myself. I struggled with self-doubt for a long time, always believing that I wasn't good enough or didn't measure up to others. But reading all of your responses has been a game changer. It's as if you've helped me see myself in a completely new light, and I'm finally starting to feel more confident than I ever have. In fact, I'm seriously considering turning up to my family's lunch and shocking them. They haven't seen me in a long time, and since I don't use social media, they have no idea how much weight I've dropped. It will be interesting to witness their reactions. Update 2. Okay, Reddit, you're not prepared for this upgrade. Grab some popcorn because things are about to get exciting. I decided to fly down to join my family for lunch. As I previously stated, I believed that when they saw me, they would be proud of the transformation I had undergone. After all, they were the ones who pushed me into it in the first place. Surely, they'd be overjoyed to see the positive improvements in me and finally recognize the effort I'd put in. When I walked into my parents' house, their jaws absolutely dropped. They looked at me, stunned. As if they couldn't believe I was the same person. After a time, they stammered, wondering if it was actually me. I gave them a big hug, thrilled with their reaction. They continually complimented my appearance, saying how beautiful I looked and how they couldn't believe it was me. However, when Bonnie came, the situation changed. She didn't notice me at first, disregarding me as if I were invisible, as she had done so many times before. But when I rose up to greet her, she did a double take, her eyes widening with surprise. She gave an odd, almost forced laugh before reaching over and pushing her fingers on my stomach, wide-eyed, as if she wanted proof that I had truly dropped all of that weight. My parents laughed at her reaction and explained that they too couldn't believe it at first. As we settled in for lunch, the subject turned to my makeover. Bonnie and my parents bombarded me with questions about how I had done it, marveling at how different I appeared. Their voices were full of surprise, as if they had never imagined I could look any other way. Bonnie, in particular, kept saying that she had never anticipated me to alter so dramatically after dropping weight. Then she dropped this gem. When I first asked you to lose weight, I never expected you to look this pretty. I didn't even know you had that jawline. And those ankles beneath all that fat. I hesitated, attempting to maintain my cool, and smiled at her before reminding her. Bonnie, I've always been pretty. Losing weight just enhanced my features. Bonnie, on the other hand, contended that there was something more about me that was distinct. Then she had the courage to ask, did you have some surgeries done on yourself? Because there's no way you look this good by yourself. I could feel my blood starting to boil. The hubris to believe that I required surgery to look attractive when, in fact, I had worked so hard to get my current appearance. I looked her directly in the eyes and replied, wow, Bonnie, it's amazing that you think that little of me. No surgery, just a lot of hard work and self-love. Something you might want to try sometime." Bonnie's expression changed from surprise to displeasure, but I didn't care. It felt amazing to finally say something and put her in her place. Before she could react, my parents jumped in, attempting to smooth things over in their own way. "You shouldn't be offended," my mother replied. "The three of us have just never seen you look this way before. Honestly, you look even more beautiful now than Bonnie does. And she's the one getting married." Bonnie appeared much angrier following Mom's remark. I simply ignored her and concentrated on my food, allowing my sister to seethe in her rage. Then my mother joined in. "You know, I was thinking, maybe you should go back to your original hair color. I think you'd look even better with your natural shade. This blonde look makes you stand out too much. Maybe you should just go back to your old look." Bonnie and my father quickly agreed with her. My dad concurred with my mom and said, "Bonnie has always been the blonde daughter of the family, and you were the brunette. So, it would be a good idea for you to go back to your original hair color. It might make you look more like yourself." Hearing their statements, I was taken aback. I suddenly felt like the three of them were ganging up on me, attempting to bring me down. My hairstylist had suggested that I change my hair color to blonde because it better matched my skin tone and complexion. It had nothing to do with attempting to outperform or overshadow my sister. I could see why Bonnie was jealous of me. I looked nice now, but I couldn't figure out why my folks were so unhappy with me. It was as if they wanted to transform me back into who I was, despite the fact that they had wanted me to be more acceptable for their darling daughter's forthcoming wedding in the first place. But now that I did, they couldn't accept who I had become. Instead of recognizing my progress, they sought to undermine me. I finally questioned my parents. "What's your problem? Why can't I be blonde too? Does my sister own that color or something?" I paused, annoyed. "No, she doesn't. I can be blonde or brunette. It's my choice. Why does it even matter to you so much?" I couldn't understand why they were so obsessed on my returning to my former self, as if my appearance had to match who I was. Before, my mother scoffed at me and claimed that I was purposefully attempting to undermine Bonnie's wedding by making an effort to stand out with my appearance. Bonnie joined in, stating, "With your weight loss, you're already going to stand out, so do you really need to take my hair color too?" My father, as usual, agreed with them, telling me that I was being difficult for no reason and that, as Bonnie's sister, I should be more tolerant. I couldn't believe what I heard. It was not about stealing anything, it was about having the ability to do whatever made me happy. But instead of supporting it, they were all concerned about how it would make Bonnie uncomfortable. "You know what? I'm done with this," I murmured, the words almost burning as they from my lips. "The three of you are so caught up in your own negativity that you can't even accept that I've changed. The truth is, I've always been amazing just the way I am, but none of you ever saw it. Now, even after I've lost weight, it's still not good enough for you. No matter what I do, it's never enough." I took time to process what I had just said. They only gazed at me, and it didn't matter. I was done with holding back. "Since you all have so much to say about me, I think it's time I gave you some unsolicited advice, just like you love to give me." I turned to my mother first, feeling the words surge inside me like a deluge. "Mom, I really hate how loose the skin is around your eyes and your lips. They droop on one side when you laugh. I can't help but notice all your crooked teeth, and honestly, it's just disgusting to me." I just gave her a second to react before turning to my father. "Dad," I said with a stern voice, "you're bald. You really have no right to say anything about anyone's hair or their hair color. How are you going to criticize someone's looks when you can't even keep a full head of hair?" I noticed his face stiffening, but I wasn't finished yet. Finally, I resorted to Bonnie. "And you, don't ever talk down to me again. Between the two of us, I've always been the better-looking sibling. But now, with all the weight I've lost, you look even fatter than me. Just look at those chubby arms of yours." Bonnie's face flushed with shame and she appeared to be about to burst into tears. I then hoisted my glass, downed my drink in one go, and walked out with a smirk, leaving everyone stunned and astonished. I had spoken everything I needed to say. I couldn't believe those words had come out of my mouth, but I didn't regret them one bit. They deserved to be humiliated after years of being criticized. After lunch, I flew directly back home. I did not want to stay behind and attend Bonnie's wedding. Since then, my phone has been overloaded with voicemails and texts from my parents and Bonnie. They've been calling me disrespectful and foul-mouthed for how I spoke to them and for simply leaving. Mom even insists that I fly back down to attend Bonnie's wedding because it won't look good to her in-laws if I don't. Update 3. So I ended up skipping Bonnie's wedding. Thanks to all of your suggestions, instead of returning home to attend, I decided to treat myself to an impromptu staycation at a 5-star resort. Honestly, it was one of the best moves I'd made in a long time. I spent the weekend doing whatever made me happy. No drama or pressure, just pure enjoyment. I treated myself to a spa day, binge-watched my favorite shows, and even visited some new places in the city I'd been longing to see. I've also blocked my relatives, so they can't contact me again. I'm weary of being bullied by them and want to avoid all of the poison and drama. Right now, my primary focus is on self-care. I discovered that my fiancé had shared a room with his coworker, checked his phone, and was shocked to find out they had been cheating for months. Original post July 12, 2019. We've been engaged for 6 months. Together since 16. We knew and both realized that we were going to change as a person while growing up, and so communication has always been our #1 priority. We have a great relationship and our wedding is in October. I was seriously excited until now because I feel really uneasy. He went on a 2-day, 1-night work trip with his coworker, I'll call her F. I have met F once before at a company event and I didn't exactly like her. I'll be honest and say that she intimidated me and I feel insecure when I think about them spending time together. She's extremely bubbly and very attractive, also very flirty, but she's married. I didn't like that they were going on this work trip together, but what can I do? It would have been ridiculous if I told him he can't go because I don't like F. Anyways, I decided to pick him up at the airport. He was going to take a taxi, but I wanted to surprise him. They came out and F didn't look too pleased to see me. She kept talking about how much fun they had together, and at one point told me how lucky I was that my fiancé gives good massages. I was shocked and asked her how so, and it turns out he gave her a massage after the first day. I don't think this is okay and I wanted to confront him about it. Unfortunately, it doesn't stop here. Fiancé went straight to bed when we got home, so I didn't get the chance to really talk to him. I went through his bag, and I found the papers for the hotel they were staying at. 1 room is booked for 2 persons. 1 queen-size bed and a couch that can be turned into a bed. I don't even know how to feel. I don't know if this is okay or not. At the very least, I wish he would have told me. On the other hand, I didn't ask about his hotel room either. I just feel super uncomfortable. I'm trying to resist the urge to snoop on his phone and I feel terrible about it. I don't know what to do and I'm just feeling lost. Please help me out here. Top comments. Comment 1. If she made a comment about him giving her a massage right to your face, then she's trying to start shit between you and your so. Comment 2, and it worked. Comment 3, well, this is not surprising since it's fucking inappropriate behavior for parties in relationships to be doing. Comment 4. Just ask Marcellus Wallace. Comment 5. Would you give a man a foot massage? Update July 18, 2019, 6 days later. Sorry for the late update. Didn't really have the time to write something. I decided to snoop, and I hit the jackpot right away. I unlocked it with his fingerprint. Should have been the first sign. He claimed it was convenient. I scrolled through their messages and it was obvious. They were even making fun of me together. They've been sleeping together for months. Don't know what got over me, but I wanted to read everything they ever said to each other and I did. Pretty sure they slept together just 2 days after he proposed. From what I could gather from their talk, she wants him to leave me, but he's hesitant. But sleeping with her for months is okay, right? Not proud of my reaction, but I went a little crazy. Been with this dude since I was 16. I packed and threw some of his stuff and called a friend over, and woke him up and told him he should leave. He confessed and begged for a second chance. I couldn't believe it, really. He left and only came back to grab more of his stuff. I blocked him everywhere and haven't spoken to him since, but obviously I'm going to need to be in contact with him to figure out the details about our finances. I don't know, I'm still hurt and upset, but not as much as I thought. Initially I felt like I was going crazy. And I feel so stupid for not noticing or finding out earlier. I wasted so much time with him. Somehow, because it's a full-blown affair, it hurts less. Oh, and there was no work trip. I mainly feel like an idiot for not asking more questions and blindly trusting him. My friend has been with me and she is always able to make me laugh. We went out together most nights and I've been feeling better. To top it off, I slept with one of his best buddies last night, and he told me not to tell him LOL. I was drunk and wanted revenge, and well, I guess I sorta got it, though I'll definitely be letting him now. Not much else to say. I guess I'm going to be single for a while and enjoy that. I seriously can't believe I was going to get married to this asshole. Turns out you never really know people. Top comments. Comment 1. Again, for everyone who might in the future have their spouse SO tell them that they shared a hotel with an opposite-sex coworker on a business trip. No company would promote or insist on this kind of arrangement. Comment 2. The legal hassle is just too much risk. As I said in the original post, Either there was no business trip or they were in charge of booking their own rooms and the company didn't know. I've worked for a few companies and sometimes I just had an expense account so I got to book rooms for myself. So did my coworkers. But a company will never put two, especially opposite-sex coworkers in one room. Am I the asshole for not wanting my husband to go away for the weekend to his best friend's bachelor party when I'm 37 weeks pregnant? Original post, Reddit March 25, 2019. My husband's best friend got engaged, and my husband is at the wedding party. He is not the best man, but is doing most of the planning for the bachelor party. In his friend group, they usually have a golf weekend. Also, this is likely the last bachelor party in the group as the rest of the guys are already married. However, we have a 2-year-old and I'm currently pregnant with our second child and due on August 25th. When he started planning the bachelor party, I told him that planning something earlier in the summer would give him a higher chance of going for the full weekend. I originally framed it as not wanting to be stuck watching our toddler by myself for a full weekend in my 3rd trimester while he's out golfing, which was a mistake. I should have framed it as not wanting him to go away for a weekend so close to my due date. They finally picked a date for the bachelor weekend. It's August 8th, so I'll be almost 38 weeks pregnant and considered full term. Technically I'll be 38 weeks the day he plans to get back. So it's about 2 weeks before my actual due date. The bachelor party will be about 2 hours away, without traffic. On previous golf weekends, he has been terrible about keeping his phone charged and it can be hard to get in touch with him. Also, while he doesn't drink, he does smoke pot, and would most likely be smoking the whole weekend. He thinks that as long as he gets someone to watch our toddler while he's gone, it's fine to go for the full weekend, 2 to 3 nights. This makes me incredibly nervous. I am willing to compromise and agree to an overnight plus a day of golf. I would also want him to keep his phone on and charged at all times, and ask that he stay sober in case I go into labor. He seemed to think this was an unreasonable compromise when I initially brought it up. Since then, he is unwilling to discuss it until they have finalized the plans for the weekend. I'm of the mindset that there are very few times in our marriage where my needs, wants, desires take priority over his, but that this is one of them. So, Reddit, am I the asshole for not wanting him to go to a bachelor party for 2 to 3 nights so close to my due date? Update. I tried to talk to my husband about the bachelor party, and specifically asked how they arrived at that weekend. My husband said the only requirement was that every groomsman be able to attend, and that he threw out 2 dates, one in July, and the one 2 weeks before my due date. The July date didn't work for some of the groomsmen, so he picked the August date. Those were the only 2 weekends discussed, and he apparently picked both. His argument is that if I went into labor when he was at work and happened to be on a long call, it could take him over 2 hours to get home, so why is it not okay to plan a trip that would take him the same distance away? I tried to explain that there's a difference between work, where, if you can't get home, it's because someone is seriously injured or something is burning down, and a bachelor party. He doesn't see it that way and just wants to be there for his friend. In his head the due date is August 25th, and there is no chance that the baby could possibly come 2 weeks early. We didn't get a chance to discuss the duration of the weekend or the possibility of not smoking before the conversation dissolved. He got pissed when I brought up that he has a poor track record at keeping in touch during these things, although he was pretty angry throughout the whole conversation tbh. I tried to remain calm throughout the conversation, but I did cry and I was the one to walk away first. After work today, I'm getting my son and we're going to stay with my parents. Top comments. Comment 1. Nah. I get that it's a big ask, but his best friend is getting married and he's only going to be 2 hours away. I think that as long as he keeps his phone charged and he stays sober enough to drive, it's not unreasonable that he wants to attend this event he planned. But I also get why you're nervous. Can he tentatively plan to attend and check in with your doctor to see how likely it is you're going to go into labor closer to the actual date? Comment 2. Doctors can guess but are frequently wrong. Lots of women are told they'll have their baby any day now at 36 weeks and go overdue. Or told there's no way the baby is coming yet and goes into labor within a week. 2 hours away is unlikely to be a huge deal, but if he's drinking and has to sober up first, or if she has precipitous labor, he could miss the birth entirely. Second babies often come faster too. Personally, I wouldn't be willing to risk that. Comment 3. NTA. The comments here are just so frustrating. Yes, OP's husband will have to make the immense sacrifice of staying sober at a bachelor party. Woe is him, how could he possibly survive? I am assuming that both parties made the decision to have another kid. In making that decision, OP has sacrificed 9 months of alcohol, getting high at parties, eating what she wants, and any number of other things. I don't care if he organized and could have planned it on another day. I don't care if it's the last bachelor party of the group. OP and the baby come first. Not just when it's easy and convenient, but all the time. If my husband went to something like this after I'd asked him not to, and he missed the birth of our child, or showed up drunk or high while I was in labor, it would be the end of my marriage. I honestly can't believe how many people are saying OP is unreasonable. If you can't stay sober for one weekend for your family, you have a problem. Update. Reddit August 11, 2019, 5 months later. So, the bachelor party was this weekend. My husband and I ultimately decided to wait until the doctor's appointment the week before the party to make a decision. If she said baby is coming any day now, he was going to go for the day. Meanwhile, my mother-in-law volunteered to watch our son for the weekend. And it turns out that my parents are moving and wound up moving to an apartment that is 5 minutes from our house, so they would be around in case I happened to go into labor. The OB said she didn't think the baby would come this weekend, so we decided that my husband would go to the bachelor party for 2 nights, with the stipulation that he remain sober and be ready to leave at a moment's notice. My husband told his friends that he would be up on Friday. We were all set. And then on Wednesday all hell broke loose. Our son got a rash on his hands and feet, and it turns out that someone at daycare had come down with hand, foot, and mouth disease. He wasn't showing any other symptoms, so we weren't sure if he actually had it or if it was just a random rash. We decided to see how he was on Thursday. If he had a fever, I was going to get a hotel, because if I came down with it, then I could pass it to the baby, and my husband was going to have to stay home. Our son woke up fever-free on Thursday morning, so we were still all set. Then on Thursday night, my mom went to the ER with stomach pains. Turns out, she was going to need surgery. My husband was supposed to leave at 6 a.m. on Friday, but I asked him to wait until we got an update on my mom. When I called her on Friday morning, apparently she was feeling better, so the doctor told her that she might be able to go home and schedule the surgery for a later date. I gave my husband the go-ahead to leave for the bachelor party. Except then the doctor changed his mind, and decided the surgery couldn't wait. My mom spent the weekend in the hospital waiting for a surgeon to be available. She finally was able to have the surgery on Sunday morning. In the meantime, I lined up a few friends just in case I happened to go into labor. My dad was also around, but had his hands full dealing with my mom and the move. So this weekend was stressful and it felt like everything that could go wrong did. But at least the baby stayed put. My husband got to go to 2 of the 3 nights of the bachelor party, my mom's surgery went well, and our son never actually got sick. And my husband was a lot more responsive to texts than he normally is because of the whole situation with my mom. I'm just glad that my husband is home and that this weekend is finally over. TLDR. My husband was able to go to most of the bachelor party and I didn't go into labor. But it was a very stressful weekend due to other factors. Top comments. Comment 1. I nearly got a panic attack reading this. It was extremely irresponsible of your husband to leave once potential HFM and your mother's surgery was in the picture. He shouldn't even ask you, because that puts pressure on you to not be the bitch. This could easily have gone a lot worse, and you just lucked out. I was a preemie from my mother stressing out. I've had really bad HFM as an adult, and when I gave birth myself, it went from low risk to life-threatening pretty fast, and 2 hours would definitely have made a big difference. He's a father, and that means he's got to be there for you, his son, and new baby-to-be. A multi-day bachelor party can't be a priority. It doesn't matter if you have family and friends, it's his child. I feel like you only got NAH because Reddit skews young enough and male enough that they don't quite internalize all the emotional labor that men pass to women, and how optional men find putting in the time to be a father. Would they think it's reasonable if, at 1 week postpartum, you decided to leave the baby behind and party it up with your friends? After all, there's breast pumps and formula, so other people can theoretically do newborn parenting. He owes you like all the 4 a.m. feedings at this point to make this up. Comment 2. Can you imagine if she had gone into birth? OP. It's just me today? Doc. You have someone you can call? Your mom? OP. She's in emergency surgery. Doc. Your dad? OP. He's taking care of her. Doc. Any friends? OP. Well, they're caring for my son who has HFM disease. Doc. Where's your husband again? OP. See, he really wanted 2 nights with his boys. Glad it worked out, but I hope this man grows up. Comment 3. This could be turned into a movie, so much drama with a good ending. Congrats, glad everything turned out okay. Mom okay. Son okay. You and baby okay. Hubby had a nice 2 days. Now sis is going to hit the fan when the baby comes. You're going to be busier than a one-armed paper hanger. Ope made a final edit to the update edit. Wow, I really wasn't expecting this to blow up like this. My husband and I were looking at the weekend with a sense of humor. As in, what else could go wrong? He's a great husband and father, and very helpful around the house. I understand that he wanted a last hurrah with the boys before the baby comes, and I thought that we did pretty well coming up with a compromise that was as stress-free as possible for everyone involved. Unfortunately, the best laid plans and all that crap. We're both just glad that he was able to have a great time with his friends, no one got HFM, my mom is okay, and he didn't miss the baby being born. Am I the asshole for punching my husband's ex-wife straight in the throat because she kept following me and hurling racist insults at my child? Original post, January 30th, 2025. My husband's ex-wife, who we will call Shelley, hates me and I'm not a big fan of hers either. She is high conflict and has been putting my stepson in the middle of her crap since the beginning. She had him listen at our door and report back what I said. She even called CPS on me for having a medical marijuana card, nothing came of it. She will tell anyone that will listen that I stole her family from her and I destroyed her life. My husband had been divorced from her for 8 years when I met him. I just think that backstory is important. A couple of days ago I took our daughter, 4F, to the park in our subdivision to play. As I was pushing her on the swings I saw Shelley pull up. I immediately grabbed my daughter and started walking back home. Shelley began to follow me and started yelling insults and threats at me. I dialed 911 and told them what was going on so we stayed on the line. She called my daughter a half-breed, I'm black, my husband is white, and continued to follow me down the street hurling insults. I told her to leave me alone and I've called the police. That just made her more aggressive. By that point I was in front of my house and my garage door was up, so I told my daughter to go in the house and get her dad. I turn around and Shelley is running full speed towards me with her arm drawn back. I punched her dead in the throat. She fell on the ground and was gasping for air. I dropped to the ground to ask if she was okay, but she continued to try to swing at me as she gasped for air. The cops then arrived and put her in handcuffs because she started to fight them. They put us in separate areas and talked to us. She told them that I hit her first, but my husband was already outside, with the footage, ready to show the police. They asked me if I wanted to press charges and I said yes. This is where people are saying I'm wrong. We live in a small town and people got wind of what happened and almost everyone is saying I'm wrong because Shelley is 5'4" and maybe 130 pounds and I am 5'10" and weigh about 180 pounds and I weightlift. People are saying I should have gone easier on her and I could have really hurt her. They have also said I've done enough and charges weren't necessary. Of course my husband, my stepson, and my family are on my side, but I've gotten some nasty messages from people in my town calling me a monster and a bully. I feel like I was just defending myself, but I want some unbiased opinions because now I feel like I might have taken it too far and I'm starting to doubt myself. AITA? Relevant? Top comments? Commenter 1, NTA. You were defending yourself against a physical threat, and your actions were reasonable given the circumstances. Shelley's behavior was unacceptable, and she escalated the situation by following you, yelling insults, and making threats. When she charged at you with her arm drawn back, you had every right to protect yourself. 1. The criticism from people in your town seems misguided, focusing on your physical size and strength rather than the facts of the situation. The fact that Shelley is smaller than you doesn't mean you should have allowed her to attack you without defending yourself. It's also important to note that Shelley's behavior has been problematic for a long time, including putting your stepson in the middle of her conflicts and making false reports to CPS. Her actions have shown a pattern of aggression and manipulation. You did the right thing by defending yourself and pressing charges. Don't let the opinions of others make you doubt your actions. You prioritized your safety and the safety of your child, and that's something to be proud of. Commenter 2. NTA. Shelley is an idiot to try to swing on someone bigger, taller and stronger than her. And why? Because you didn't react to her insults. Instead you asked her to leave you alone and then called the cops. Had you not turned around and see her running towards you, ready to hit you, she could have caused you great damage. Instead, you threw one punch to keep her away. Too bad your fist is at her throat level. She should have thought that one out before she tried to attack you. Do not doubt yourself. You defended yourself from someone who intended to do you harm. You didn't continue to walk on her. You were not the aggressor. She stepped on your property and threatened you, and your child. The people in your town are idiots. Fight rumors with truth. Post that footage. Show the charges. You were within your rights. Period. And I defy anyone to have been in the same position who wouldn't have gotten into a defensive mode like you did. Commenter 3. NTA. It's all recorded, from the time she approached you at the park and attacked you at your home. I wonder if it's possible to charge her with a hate crime. OOP. They charged her with assault and I'm getting a restraining order. OP should tell her husband to get full custody of his son. OOP. My SS is 18 and has lived with us since he was 8. Commenter 4. Nope NTA. She came at you while you were trying to keep your child safe. And 8 years? She needs to move on. OP. I don't think she'll ever move on. My husband is a great guy and she really did mess up. He truly loved her but she was too toxic to accept it. Now I think she has a lot of regrets. Her aggression definitely got worse after I had my daughter because she wanted a girl. Update, January 31st, 2025. It hasn't even been 24 hours since my last post but I feel y'all deserve an update and for me to clarify some things. Firstly, my daughter and I are okay and thank you all so much for your support. My daughter heard what was said but fortunately has no idea what it means. She also did not see any of the physical violence that occurred. Secondly, Shelly is still in jail. Luckily for us her family doesn't even like her so no one has bailed her out. She also had a warrant so she will probably be sitting there for a while. Next, for everyone worried about my stepson, he's just my son in our house. Thank you so much for the concern but he is 18 years old and I have been his mother figure for the past 10 years. He knows his mom's antics and he is in therapy and he's okay. For the people that privately messaged me to say I alienated my stepson from his mom, shame on you. Y'all have no idea what this kid has dealt with through the years and he's so strong. I also would like to clarify that I did press charges. I spoke to my lawyer, my aunt, and she said I actually have plenty of evidence from over the years to sue Shelly for the emotional pain she has caused me and I will be pursuing that. I'm going to make it hurt so she knows that this behavior will not be tolerated. I also am in the process of getting a restraining order which will not take long at all given all the evidence. Lastly, this whole situation has been so eye-opening about the lack of support I have living in this town. I've stayed because I thought it was best for my family but after speaking with my husband and stepson we all realized it's best for everyone if we move and start fresh. If anyone has suggestions of diverse places to move to with a good school system for our daughter please comment down below. I want to thank you all so much again for your help. I've felt more support from strangers on the internet than I have from the community I've lived in for years. I will continue to keep you all updated with whatever I can as I continue this process. Relevant comments. What was the reason for OOP's husband's divorce from his ex? OOP. She hit him in front of their son and fractured his eye socket. Commenter 1. Make sure Shelly actually has enough assets income to make suing her worth it. You know the old saying, you can't get blood out of a turnip. She sounds massively emotionally unregulated since she had a warrant out already. Emotionally unregulated people often can't hold jobs and really don't have money. Oop. She is a master esthetician with her own spa. She has money, even though she says she doesn't. Commenter 2. If you're willing to move to Scotland we take kick-ass moms just fine here. Other than that I can't help. But you were absolutely right in what you did and I agree it hurt and teach the lesson she best not come back for more. Based on OOP's background, can she relocate to any city and find a job? OOP. I'm actually a private financial advisor so I work from home mostly. My husband is an engineer and he can get work just about anywhere. My husband left our kids home alone but denies it, even after footage showed a woman visiting. He still refuses to admit the truth. My husband is 43 and I'm 31. We've been married for 7 years and have a 5-year-old and a 9-month-old. My husband left our children alone and he refuses to admit to it or tell me where he was. I'm furious, enraged, and my husband keeps telling me I'm making a big deal about nothing. This just happened this weekend. I am on the board of directors for a local non-profit organization. I had to attend an event for that organization this past Saturday, and I was gone for most of the day. My husband was supposed to be home with our kids. I texted him a few times and he responded. When I called around midday he didn't respond, but that's not very unusual. Shortly after that, I got a call from my mom. She said my son had just called her and when she asked him what he and his sister were doing, he said they were both watching TV. When she asked where their dad was, he said his dad wasn't there. My mom asked him several other questions and from my son's responses she believed he was telling the truth and that my husband wasn't there and that there was no adult there at all. She said he didn't seem scared to be alone or worried about where his dad was at. He just called her to chat. He has a tablet designed for children, with pre-programmed contacts that he can call. It's only a few people, just family members. I left the event immediately and began texting and calling my husband repeatedly. He didn't respond to my first several attempts. It took him about 10 minutes, I was halfway home at that point, to respond. I was so confused, so worried, really mad, and I asked him where he was. He said he was at home. I told him our son had just told his grandmother that he was home alone with his baby sister watching TV about 15 minutes ago. My husband denied it and I told him I was too upset to talk and drive. When I got home, I checked on the kids right away and they were both fine. I asked my husband again, where was he? He said he was home the entire time. He didn't know what our son was talking about, but he must have just been confused since he had gone to the basement to do some laundry. I ran down to the basement. It was the same load of laundry I'd thrown in the dryer the night before. He didn't do any laundry when I was gone. I asked my husband why my son would be confused about whether his dad was home or not. Where in our home would he have gone and for how long for our son to think his dad wasn't home? That doesn't make sense with a 5-year-old and a 9-month-old. You wouldn't leave them unattended that long. Why was he nowhere to be found when my mom asked my son to go check certain areas of the house? I begged my husband to just admit it, to stop treating me like an idiot and to stop accusing our son of lying. Just tell me the truth, because being lied to right to my face is so incredibly maddening. He insists he was home, but he can't come up with any believable story of where he was at or what he was doing during that time. The way he answers me when I ask him about this and demands truthful answers is so dismissive. When I tell him, you left our children alone, he quickly says, no, I didn't, so anyway. He says I'm overreacting and letting our son's imagination drive me crazy. I am convinced he was gone. We don't have a Ring camera, but at least one of our neighbors does. I'm so upset about this that I'm tempted to ask our neighbor for the Ring footage. I had to go out to my car and scream and cry because I got so upset. Of course, I didn't want my kids to see my reaction. I can't put into words how upset I am about the fact that I know he must have really left them alone but have no proof and am being treated like I'm just a paranoid nutcase of a mother-woman by him. Comments. Comment 1. When my now ex did this, it was drugs. I didn't know about it. He told me months later when I found out that he often left at night and out the kids in the living room together, so if the house burned down at least they'd be together. My youngest was under a year. The oldest was 5. Don't stop asking questions. Oop. This gives me chills. Comment 2. I haven't seen it anywhere, but will admit I haven't looked super deeply, so I'll add this to you. This is not the first time your husband has left your children alone. Your son's reaction to grandma is proof enough of that. He was calm, completely unbothered by the fact that he and the baby were alone. He would not react like that the first time. Comment 3. As someone who was constantly left alone with her younger brother at such a young age, you are so right. Update. 4 days later. Last weekend my husband left our 5-year-old and 9-month-old home alone while I was gone and then refused to admit it or provide a plausible explanation. Since then, we had many arguments about it. I've been living in a constant state of anger and frustration. I didn't want to fight about it anymore, but I couldn't help it and I kept bringing it up again and again. I couldn't lay low and pretend to get over it while I waited for him to do it again and catch him in whatever was going on. I also knew that demanding he tell me the truth wasn't going to get me anywhere. Since he'd been refusing to talk and deflecting for days. All it was doing was making me enraged and feel like I was about to have a brain aneurysm. I told him to hand me his phone so I could check his location at the time. He refused. He said he wouldn't do it and that it was a violation of his privacy, he won't be treated that way, and refuses to give in to my delusions. You think I enjoy being in a situation where I have to beg my husband to show me his phone so I can see where he is? I hate it. I don't want to live that way. I told him it's simple, if he was really at home the entire time, just prove it. Why wouldn't he want to clear this whole thing up? I got so mad that he wouldn't turn over his phone that I told him I was going to the neighbors to get their doorbell footage. At first he was like, fine, go do it. He didn't think I actually would. He knows I don't like to air drama to others, so he probably figured I'd just swallow all of this crap he's been giving me. Luckily, I was totally being driven by anger at this point, so nothing was going to stop me from going to the neighbors. When I actually started to go out the door, he tried to stop me and followed me out the door. I felt pure anger rushing through my veins, nothing else. The neighbor, who I've probably said less than 10 words to in the entire time we've lived here, told me he'd send me the footage. I went home, told my husband that the neighbor didn't have the footage from that day anymore, and told him I just needed to go to the store and cool off. So I put the kids in the car and went and parked somewhere while I waited for the neighbor to send me the footage. I have the neighbor's number now too, and he told me if I need any more footage he will be happy to give it to me. The video shows a blue car that I don't recognize show up and park in our driveway. A blonde woman gets out of the car and goes towards my house. She walks on the outside of our garage toward the gate leading to our backyard. The gate is too far back and out of the way to be seen on the doorbell footage. She and her car were there for 23 minutes. Imagine that. The car leaves right around the time that my husband called me to say he was home and had been home the entire time, as I was rushing home in a panic and calling him on repeat. One of two possibilities as to where they went. She either came in through the side door of the house, which does provide direct access to the basement. Or, and what I think is more likely, is that they were in the backmost area of our yard, which is a gated pool area. Immediately behind our house is a grass lawn, then you step down a few steps and we have a patio, and then there is a fully gated area where the pool is. It's not like you think of when you picture a gated pool. It's a full, 6-foot wood fence all the way around, plus even taller landscaping for added privacy. You can't see into the area at all unless you're inside. I think it's more likely that they were back there because my son said his dad's keys were gone and we keep that gate locked with a key. The pool is closed for winter, but there is one small building back there, sort of like a shed we converted into a changing area, and there is a covered patio with furniture. I'm convinced that's where they were. So technically he was home, but in an area totally removed from the house and where he couldn't see or hear the kids if something happened. I asked him how he could explain this. What were they doing? I obviously don't need him to tell me what they were doing, but for some reason I still had hope that he'd finally be honest. He wasn't contrite. He showed no remorse. He was just like, yeah, she was here, but I obviously never left. Who is she? How long has this been going on? And if he's going to be such a disgusting, despicable excuse of a man, then why couldn't he at least have found any other time and any other lie or excuse other than when he was home alone with our kids? I told him I know this has happened before and I demanded to know how many times he's done this when he's been home alone with the kids. He swears this is the only time, but he still doesn't have the balls to confess to what they were doing. I don't believe him that this was the only time, FYI. I still have so many questions and I still feel like my heart is beating 200 times a minute. My blood pressure is through the roof. I've cried a lot, sobbed, begged for somebody to help me, yelled, screamed, ordered a bunch of books about divorce and custody. And you know what? The next day after our multiple explosive fights, him putting his hands on me, and me seeing the evidence, he acted like everything was totally normal and like none of that stuff ever happened. I woke up still seething, exhausted, broken, and he's acting like everything is totally normal. He said he was ordering breakfast to be delivered from our favorite breakfast place. He asked if I wanted to go to the store together later and try this new recipe for chili tonight. What? Why would I want to do any of these things with you now? Absolutely no acknowledgement of anything he's done or what's transpired between us in the past few days. He deserved an Oscar for how well he was able to act like none of that happened, completely comfortable and non-fazed. I know that it's a waste of my energy, but I just desperately want him to admit the full truth of what he did that day and any other day with this woman. I want to hear it from him. It won't change whatever he's done, but he could at least have the respect and decency to be honest now that he's been caught. That's a ridiculous thought though, right? How foolish of me to expect this man to show decency and honesty now. If he was a decent and honest man, then he wouldn't have had a strange woman over to our house and been out of sight from our kids for 23 minutes. His continued denial and refusal to admit to anything other than the bare minimum, his attitude like I'm somehow being controlling or infringing on his rights by asking for information. That's almost more hurtful than him cheating on me. Comments. Comment 1. OP, he has not been honest and won't be honest. Even if he is, what would that give you? Could you even believe it? OP, you know what he was doing. You don't need him to spell it out for you. Put yourself and your children first. OP. At the end of the day, him admitting to what he's done wouldn't really change anything. It certainly won't change anything he's done. It won't make it better. And I probably still wouldn't believe I was getting the full truth. Yet, I can't stop seething over the fact that he's refusing to give me any info. Comment 2. Because he is hoping that if he doesn't admit to it, there is a chance you will stay with him. He cheated. He endangered your children. He is selfish. Comment 3. I'm so sorry you're going through this. Unfortunately, you won't get anything for him. If I were you, I'd channel that anger into a plan to take your kids and leave. He will never say he left his kids in a dangerous situation to cheat on you. You know it's what happened, he knows it's what's happened, and it will continue, make no mistake. My stepmother had hidden my late father's will, stealing my inheritance. Now that she came begging for help, I refused. My name is Lily Andrews, and I am 28 years old. My stepmother and younger sister Rachel and I live in the house that my late father bequeathed to us. My life has never been easy in our family, but I've always tried to sort things out for the sake of peace. That night, everything changed. It was a large party. My stepmother, Gloria, enjoys arranging these costly occasions, despite her constant complaints about money. Guests packed the home, laughing, drinking, and flaunting their pricey outfits. I remained to myself, standing near the kitchen and avoiding the spotlight, like I normally do. Then something happened. Rachel, my 24-year-old sister, stood in the center of the living room, her voice loud enough to pique everyone's interest. "Oh, Lily is here? Look at her, always hiding in the shadows, as if she doesn't belong." Her words sliced into me like a knife. Some attendees laughed uneasily, unsure how to respond. My face flushed with shame, but I did not answer. Rachel understood how much I disliked confrontations. Gloria joined in before I could slip away. "Well, maybe Lily doesn't belong here after all," she joked. "She doesn't contribute to anything important around here, unlike Rachel." Gloria smiled at the audience, as if her comments were a joke. However, they weren't. I wanted to yell and protect myself, but I remained silent. No one knew I'd been surreptitiously paying Rachel's college tuition for the past 2 years. She wouldn't have had her expensive degree without me, and now she's disrespecting me in front of everyone. After the party, I returned to my room, hoping for some peace and quiet. But Gloria wasn't finished with me yet. She stormed in, her tone rough and cold. "You should pack your belongings and leave, Lily. This isn't your house anymore. You're just taking up space." I stood there, frozen. How could she say that? My father left the house to me. But Gloria had always acted as if she owned everything, and Rachel took her lead. For the first time in years, I did not fight or cry. I just looked at her and replied, "Fine, I'll leave." But in my heart, I knew it wasn't over. They were unaware of the sacrifices I had made for them. They had no idea that their remarks were pushing me to the point of no return, and they had no idea what I was going to do next. My mind raced as I packed my things. Every memory of Gloria and Rachel's mistreatment played back in my mind, the sarcastic remarks, the frequent comparisons, and the way they always took me for granted. As I closed up my luggage, I felt the weight of years of quiet sorrow lifted from my shoulders. This house might have been my father's gift to me, but it had become a prison. It was no longer a home. Before leaving, I went into my room and got the folder I'd concealed in the back of my closet. Inside were all of Rachel's college tuition receipts, proving all I had done for her. I was not going to let her forget it. As I approached the front door with my bag, Gloria and Rachel were seated in the living room, sipping wine and joking as if nothing had occurred. Rachel smirked when they spotted me. "Are you finally leaving?" "It took you too long," she replied, rolling her eyes. I paused in my tracks to look at her. My voice was calm but forceful. "You know, Rachel, I've always backed you. I funded your tuition when you couldn't afford it. So this is how you repay me? Mocking me in front of everyone?" Her face became pallid. "What are you talking about?" Rachel asked. I held up the folder and dropped it on the coffee table. "Here is the proof, every money I made to keep you in school. You didn't know, did you? Gloria told you that was her, right?" Rachel looked at Gloria, her uncertainty rising to rage. "You told me you were paying for it?" she shouted. Gloria stood up and tried to maintain her composure. "That is enough, Lily. Stop trying to create drama and simply leave." I shake my head. "Oh, I am leaving. But from now on, you are on your own. I will not pay another dime for either of you." With that, I walked out the door, leaving them to face the truth. For the first time in years, I felt liberated. The next morning, I moved into a small but comfortable apartment on the opposite side of town. It wasn't a lot, but it was mine. I began focusing on myself for a change, working harder at my career, meeting new people, and caring for my mental health. Meanwhile, things in the old house began to fall apart. Rachel was unable to keep up with her college expenses and had to quit. Gloria attempted to guilt me into assisting them, but I ignored her calls. One day, Rachel texted me. "Lily, I apologize for everything. Could we talk?" I looked at the message for a long time. Part of me wanted to forgive her, but another part of me understood that forgiveness did not imply returning to the way things were. I responded, "We can talk, but I won't let you take advantage of me again." When we eventually met, Rachel burst into tears. She stated that she had been jealous of me for many years. She thought Gloria's approval was all that counted, but she now realizes how toxic Gloria's influence was. "I know I've hurt you, Lily," she admitted, her voice shaking. "I don't expect you to forgive me, but I want to make things right." Rachel began working to repair our friendship. She really apologized and began working to pay her own way through school. For the first time in years, I recognized her as the sister I once cared about. Gloria attempted to persuade Rachel into turning against me again, but Rachel had finally seen her true colors. When Gloria realized she couldn't control us anymore, she fled town, leaving behind the toxic environment she had created. Rachel and I gradually rebuilt our relationship, this time based on respect and honesty. I maintained my distance, focusing on my own ambitions and pleasure, but I knew one thing for certain. I would never allow someone to take advantage of me again. Months passed before things felt normal again. I had settled into my new apartment, concentrating on my profession and creating a life that was not centered on my family's instability. Rachel and I were gradually restoring trust, and I admired her efforts, even if I wasn't ready to fully reintegrate her into my life. Then one evening, when I was preparing dinner, my phone rang. The number was unfamiliar. "Hello?" I responded hesitantly. "Is this Lily Andrews?" a forceful voice said. "Yes." "Who is this?" "This is Margaret Gray with Greenfield Law Offices. I'm calling about your late father's estate." My heart skips a beat. "Estate? I thought everything was settled years ago." Margaret hesitated. "Not everything. A situation involving your father's will has lately come to light. Would you be available to meet tomorrow?" I agreed, but I couldn't shake the impression that this call was about more than paperwork. The next day, I sat in Margaret's office, nervous. She handed me a bundle of documents, her face stern. "Lily, your father left a second will, which was only recently discovered." Margaret's comments caused my heart to pound. "This will override the previous one and includes a significant inheritance, a trust fund intended for you." My thoughts raced. A trust fund? Why didn't this come up before? "It was deliberately hidden," Margaret explained. "We suspect Gloria hid it by claiming ignorance when the estate was first split. She probably didn't want you to use the money." I felt both angry and relieved. My stepmother had stolen from me, but now I had the opportunity to reclaim what was rightfully mine. "Can I access it now?" I asked. "Yes," Margaret replied with a smile. "And I believe you'll find the sum substantial. Your father wanted you to be financially secure." When I saw the numbers, my jaw sank. The trust fund had more than $500,000. The trust fund became widely known, and Gloria soon returned. She arrived unannounced at my apartment, looking untidy and desperate. "Lily, we need to talk," she continued, her voice quivering. "There's nothing to talk about, Gloria," I said, maintaining a chilly tone. "I know about the trust fund," she blurted out. "You don't understand how hard things have been for Rachel and me. We need help." I looked at her incredulously. "You mean the same Rachel you duped into turning against me? The same Rachel who is finally learning to stand on her own without your toxic influence?" Gloria's face flushed hot. "I tried to safeguard this family. Everything I did was for Rachel's future." "No," I replied firmly. "You did everything for yourself. And you know what? I'm finished cleaning up your mess." Later that week, Rachel called me in tears. "Gloria is furious with me," she continued. "She thinks I betrayed her because I won't ask you for money." "What do you want me to do, Rachel?" I asked. "Nothing," she said, her voice steady. "I simply wanted to let you know that I am done with her. I'm moving out and starting a job. I do not want to be like her anymore." Her words astonished me. Rachel had finally accepted responsibility for her life. For the first time, I had a glimmer of optimism for our relationship. With Gloria out of my life, I focused on building a future I could be proud of. I used a portion of the trust fund to start my own business, which I had been dreaming about for years. It wasn't easy, but it was mine, and it gave me a sense of purpose that I hadn't experienced before. Rachel and I stayed in touch and met for coffee or supper on occasion. She was becoming a better version of herself, and I was proud of her. Gloria, I heard, left to another city, leaving behind the damage she caused. I did not feel sorry for her. She had reaped what she sowed. Looking back, I understand that being kicked out of my own home was the finest thing that could have happened to me. It encouraged me to stand up for myself and stop allowing others to take advantage of my goodwill. Now, I live a life full of peace, purpose, and the assurance that I am finally free of my stepmother's toxic control. Rachel is finally learning how to stand on her own 2 feet. And perhaps, just maybe, we'll be able to reconnect as sisters again. I discovered my husband's secret family by chance. He had a double life, another child, and was stealing from us. It was a typical Saturday morning. I was in the grocery store, carrying my basket through the aisles, when I noticed him. Marcus, my husband, was standing in the produce area with a basket full of apples. But he was not alone. Next to him was a woman I'd never seen before, and between them was a young girl, no more than 5 years old, who called him Daddy. My heart has stopped. I stood there, motionless, as the scene unfolded in front of me. Marcus laughed at something the woman said, his hand resting on her lower back in a way that seemed all too familiar. The little girl tugged on his sleeve, pleading for a banana, and he beamed down at her as if she were the center of his universe. I felt as if I were witnessing a movie. This couldn't be genuine. But it was. And it crushed all I thought I understood about my marriage. I did not confront him there. I could not. Instead, I turned around and abandoned my cart in the middle of the aisle, dashing out of the store before anyone could see me cry. When I came home, my mind was racing. How long was this going on? Who was the woman? And who was the tiny girl? Marcus returned home a few hours later, acting quite normal. He kissed my cheek and asked about my day, as if nothing had happened. I wanted to yell and demand answers, but couldn't bring myself to do so. Instead, I smiled and said everything was good. But inwardly, I was collapsing. That night, while Marcus was sleeping, I checked his phone. I'd never done anything like this before, but I needed to know the truth. What I discovered was worse than I had imagined. Texts. Photos. Even a calendar with the woman from the business. Her name was Vanessa. And the little girl's name was Lily. According to the messages, she is Marcus' daughter. The next morning, I had a knot in my stomach. Marcus had already left, leaving a note on the kitchen counter indicating he had an early meeting. I knew better now. I checked his shared calendar and discovered that he was going to have breakfast with Vanessa and Lily at a diner across town. My hands shook as I dressed and walked out the door. I arrived at the diner right as they were being seated. I sat in my car, looking out the window while Marcus laughed with Vanessa and assisted Lily in cutting her pancakes. It was like watching the perfect small family. One I was not a part of. I experienced a range of feelings, including rage, betrayal, and a profound aching sadness. How could he accomplish this? To me? To us? I waited until they had left the diner before following them. Marcus dropped Vanessa and Lily off at a little house on the other side of town and drove to work as if everything was okay. I sat outside the house for hours, trying to decide what to do. Finally, I gathered the bravery to knock on the door. Vanessa responded, her look changing from astonishment to suspicion when she noticed me. "Can I help you?" she said, her voice wary. I took a deep breath. "I'm Marcus's wife," I explained, my voice quivering. Vanessa's eyes widened. For a minute, neither of us spoke. Then she stood aside, gesturing for me to enter. The house looked comfortable, with portraits of Vanessa, Lily, and, to my horror, Marcus. There were photos of them at the park, on vacation, and at what appeared to be a birthday party. It was like entering an alternate dimension in which Marcus lived a completely different life. Vanessa offered me a cup of coffee and we sat at the kitchen table. "How long have you known Marcus?" I inquired, my tone barely above a whisper. Vanessa hesitated before sighing. 5 years, she answered. "We met at work." He informed me that he was divorced. I felt as if the ground had been pulled out from beneath me. 5 years. That meant Marcus had been leading a double life for nearly half of our marriage. "What about Lily?" I inquired, my voice breaking. Vanessa gazed down at her hands. "She's his daughter," she replied gently. "He's been a part of her life since the day she was born." I wasn't sure what to say. My mind was racing as I tried to absorb what I had just learnt. Marcus wasn't simply having an affair, he had an entire other family. He had been keeping his family from me for years. As I sat at Vanessa's kitchen table, my head was filled with questions. "Marcus, how had you kept this a secret for so long? How hadn't I noticed?" But before I could ask any further questions, Vanessa spoke again. "There's something else you should know," she replied, her tone cautious. She stood up and exited the room, returning moments later with a folder. Inside were legal documents such as custody agreements, child support payments, and even a will. My hands shook as I paged through them. According to the papers, Marcus had been financially supporting Vanessa and Lily for several years. He had even designated Lily as his beneficiary in the event of his death. "He told me you knew," Vanessa said, her voice filled with shame. "He said you two had an arrangement, that you were okay with it as long as he didn't bring it up around you." I felt a flash of rage. "That's a lie," I replied, my voice quivering. I had no idea any of this was happening. Vanessa appeared shocked. "I'm very sorry," she said. "I had no idea he was lying to both of us." We sat in silence for a long time, digesting the severity of Marcus' betrayal. Vanessa then said something that stopped me cold. "There's something else," she explained. "Marcus has been discussing leaving you. He stated that he wants to be with me and Lily full time." I felt like I had been hit in the stomach. Marcus wasn't only hiding a secret family. He intended to leave me for them. I wasn't sure what to do. Part of me wanted to face him, shout and cry for answers. But another part of me understood I had to be clever about this. If Marcus could lie to me for years, what else could he do? I chose to acquire proof. Over the next 3 weeks, I chronicled everything. Texts, images, and bank records. I even hired a private investigator to look further into Marcus's secret life. What I discovered was surprising. Marcus was not only helping Vanessa and Lily, but he was also transferring funds from our joint accounts into a hidden savings account in Vanessa's name. But the biggest surprise occurred when the investigator discovered something I had never imagined. Marcus has another child. A son. I live in a distant state with another woman. It turns out that Vanessa and Lily weren't his only secret family. Armed with all of the information, I decided to confront Marcus. I waited until he returned home from work one evening, his normal cheerful self, ignorant of the impending storm. I seated him down at the kitchen table with the packet of documents in front of him. "What's this?" he inquired, his tone light but his gaze watchful. "Open it," I murmured, my voice firm despite the rage building inside me. He stopped before flipping through the papers. His face turned pale when he understood what he was staring at. "Where did you get this?" he questioned, his voice raised. "I hired a private investigator," I said. "And I spoke to Vanessa. Marcus, I know everything. About her. About Lily. Regarding your son in another state. I know you've been stealing money from us. I know everything." Marcus looked at me, his expression a mix of shock and dread. For a little while, he said nothing. Then he began to explain, or, rather, make excuses. "It's not what you think," he replied. "I never intended to hurt you. I got in over my head, and I had no idea how to get out. I didn't purchase it." "You didn't know how to get out," I repeated, my voice quivering with rage. "You have been lying to me for years, Marcus. You've been living a double, no, triple life and didn't think it would damage me?" He tried to apologize and beg for forgiveness, but I wasn't having it. "You don't get to apologize," I responded. "You can't act like a victim here. You made your decisions, and now you have to deal with the consequences." I informed him that I filed for divorce and that I intended to take everything he had. He tried to reason and persuade me to give him another chance, but I was done. I grabbed a bag and departed that night, staying with a friend while I planned my future actions. The following few weeks were a blur of legal battles and mental misery. Marcus fought me every step of the way, but the evidence proved overwhelming. In the end, I received the property, the majority of our savings, and complete custody of our children. Marcus was ordered to pay child support and alimony, but I knew it wouldn't be enough to compensate for what he had done. The divorce was finalized 6 months later, but the emotional scars took far longer to heal. Marcus attempted to stay in touch, stating that he wanted to be a part of our children's life, but I couldn't trust him. How could I? After all he had done. I set stringent boundaries, only allowing him supervised visits. Vanessa contacted me several times, apologizing for her role in the issue. She admitted that she had no idea Marcus was married when they first met, and by the time she found out, she was already in too deep. I didn't really blame her. Marcus lied to both of us. I focused on reconstructing my life. I returned to school and earned a degree in counseling so that I might help others in similar situations. It was therapeutic in a way, transforming my misery into something positive. My children were my rock throughout it all, and their tenacity and love gave me the fortitude to keep going. It's been 5 years since that day in the grocery store, and while the anguish hasn't totally subsided, it's become more manageable. I've learned to trust again, both in myself and in others. I've even started dating, but I'm taking things slowly. Marcus, on the other hand, has not done as well. His lies caught up with him, and he not only lost me, but also Vanessa and his other family members. He's now alone. And, while I feel terrible for him, I know it's a bed he made for himself. If there's one thing I've learned from this, it's that you have no control over what other people do, but you can control how you respond. I opted to turn my anguish into strength, and by doing so, I discovered a new sense of purpose. This event taught me that life is unpredictable, and even those you trust the most can betray you in ways you never expected. But it also demonstrated how strong I am. How resilient we can all be when confronted with adversity. If you've ever been through something similar, please share your experience in the comments. How did you manage it? Am I the asshole for getting a co-worker fired after she repeatedly mocked me for my breast implants, unaware that I got them due to cancerous cells? Original post. I'm 28 and when I was 24 Mom died of breast cancer, after both of my nanas also died of it. I got some tests done and found that I did have some potentially cancerous cells in my breast tissue, and the doctor said I could either wait and see if they did turn harmful or I could get ahead of it and get a double mastectomy. I got a double mastectomy. I was warned about scarring but not the extent of it and wound up with scars an inch long and half an inch wide on my chest, and I hated the way it looked. It got to the stage where it was having a serious impact on my mental health. I felt sick seeing myself, and I wouldn't leave my flat. I went to a therapist, who did some CBT with me before she suggested seeing a plastic surgeon about scar reduction. The plastic surgeon said the scars could be hidden with implants. I was naturally big, an F-cup, before the mastectomy, so I opted to go with slightly smaller but still fairly large DD-sized implants. They hid the scars pretty well and I'm happy with them. My mental health improved and I felt comfortable in my own skin again. A few months ago I was at work having lunch with this friend of mine and we were planning a holiday. She made a joke about my boobs exploding on the plane. The friend knew me before the surgery and I knew she wasn't being mean, so I laughed. A coworker, Jill, overheard and, not knowing about the cancer thing, told everyone that I'd had a boob job. She hated me from then on out, and she made a bunch of jokes to other coworkers, calling me fake in 2 ways, and more plastic than Barbie, all when I was in earshot. I've asked her to stop more than once. We were all having lunch today. Me, Jill, and a few others. And a coworker, Bob, was talking about his daughter wanting to marry this guy who has nothing going for him. And I said that Bob was being a little shallow. Jill replied, "Well, you'd know all about being shallow," gesturing at my chest. I'd had enough and said, "Do you know why I have these? A few years ago the doctors found potentially cancerous cells in my breast tissue. I was advised to get a double mastectomy by a doctor and was left with huge ugly scars on my chest. I went to see a therapist and cosmetic surgeon, who advised me to get implants to hide the scars, and I did just so I could look at myself in the mirror without crying. So maybe next time you want to judge someone for having cosmetic surgery, you should ask them why they had it first." And feeling like that was a mic drop moment, I picked up my food and left. Someone from the lunchroom came to talk to me, saying Jill was just joking. I was being oversensitive and a bitch about it when Jill didn't know about the cancerous cells. I replied that maybe Jill shouldn't have been a bitch to begin with. It's the end of the day now and half the office seems to side with Jill and the other half with me. Relevant comments. Comment 1. NTA: Jill shouldn't be commenting on her coworkers' bodies. This could easily be seen as sexual harassment. Edit. OP, please mention to HR that you repeatedly asked Jill to stop commenting on your body and she refused. I don't see this ending well for Jill since she continuously commented on your body and pushed you to the point of feeling uncomfortable in the workplace. OP, I don't have any record of it. I only ever spoke to her about stopping in private. The 4 times I asked were in the lift, twice, the stairwell and the women's bathroom, all places without cameras, so the only person who can confirm I asked her is Jill herself. I can prove she's been making comments about my body by asking any coworker she spoke to but can't prove I asked her to stop. Edit. HR want to see me about creating a hostile work environment, so looks like someone reported either me or Jill or both. Update. HR wants to see me tomorrow, so I'll update after work. If they're dealing with it quickly, though, it can't be good. Update 2. Some coworkers have offered to write me letters of support for HR tomorrow, basically saying that they've seen Jill harass me completely with rough dates and times. Relevant comments. Who filed the HR complaint? Oop. Wouldn't be surprised if it turned out Jill was the one who reported me. She has a friend in HR. Would it count as sexual harassment? Commenter. She has a friend in HR. If the note is from that friend, or the meeting is with that friend, I would try to go over her head as fast as possible. Perhaps initiating a counterclaim, not sure if that is the right term. You may want to ask over at /r/legal advice or r/legal advice UK if you are in the UK as someone else guessed. OOP? I am in the UK. The email is from Jill's friend, so it looks like the friend will be overseeing the complaint, but there's something in my contract that basically says if HR ever gets involved I have the right to an unbiased overseer and can request a different one if I can prove the current one is biased. So if it is this woman and I can show she and Jill are friends, then I might be able to fix it or go above her head. Editor's note. Edited out a rehash of the AITA post. For the rest of the day I had about 1/3 of my office come up to me and offer support, and the rest tell me that Jill was just joking around and I was being a bitch. I replied that Jill was being a bitch long before I was. I then got an email from HR saying they wanted to talk to me the following day, and when I called for clarification they mentioned a hostile work environment. Note, this is apparently an American term and holds little weight in England, but it's what was said over the phone. I knew the person who signed off the email and I'd spoken to. Her name was Debbie, and she was Jill's friend in HR, so I was fairly confident on who had reported me. I realized that if this was already being sent to HR, I needed as much ammunition as possible, so I went about collecting my information. As Debbie had dealt with me so far, it was safe to assume she would be the person reviewing the complaint with me, and if that was true I was fucked. However, I vaguely remembered a section on complaints that was in my contract when I first signed with the company. I flicked through the contract and there was a part in complaints section that said I was contractually allowed to request a change of reviewer if I felt my allocated reviewer was biased. It was called an impartial overseer. I photocopied the page and highlighted that part. Then I messaged the people who had offered their support over Facebook, and said basically HR have asked to see me. Do any of you remember Jill insulting me to your face, and are you willing to write and sign something saying what you heard and when? Not everyone was willing to help, as Jill is somewhat feared in the office due to her befriending HR and management, but about 20 people were willing to help me. I guessed roughly when I'd asked Jill to stop previously. The 4 asks over the last few months, some timings were easy to guess as they'd happened on my break or when I'd first arrived at work, and I wrote them all down, along with a rough time of when the lunchroom confrontation happened and a list of names of who was there for the lunchroom confrontation. I got to work slightly early the next morning. I went round everyone who had messaged me, and most of them managed to give me a printed and signed letter. Some didn't manage to write one, but NBD. This isn't exact words as there's 16 letters to sum up here, but the gist was, my name is their name. I work with Jill last name and OP. On date at time, approx, I spoke with Jill last name, during which she referred to OP as quoted insult. I felt this was inappropriate as it directly related to OP's appearance, and am willing to go on record further to establish that Jill last name has been discussing OP in the workplace in the same manner for 3 months now, causing me discomfort and creating what I feel is a hostile work environment. Signed their name, I wound up with about 16 letters, all from different people, and one of them was in the lunchroom for my conversation with Jill. Some even had bullet-pointed lists of everything Jill had said to them about me or other people. As it turns out, Jill has issues with a lot of people's appearances. She apparently made comments about one coworker's weight, and something anti-Semitic about a different coworker's nose, all of which were put in these letters. There are about 45 people in the office, so while 16 wasn't a majority, it's still a decent amount. The letters weren't hugely long, most were only a paragraph, but they had all the necessary information. I was asked to come to HR at 10 a.m. I took the letters from coworkers, the photocopy of the page in my contract, and my dates and times in a little folder with me. I got there and Debbie was the one overseeing the interview. She got up from her desk, ready to lead me into another room. I immediately turned to the other HR worker that was currently there and said, "So is my meeting with you then?" Debbie said, "No, you're with me." I replied that this wouldn't sit well with me, as my contract states I have a right to an impartial overseer. And as I said this, I took the contract page out of my folder. Debbie read it. I wouldn't let her take the paper when there was a shredder so close by, and said she could be impartial. I replied that I really didn't mean to be a pain, but I had it on good authority that the person on the other end of this complaint is her friend, and my contract does say I'm allowed an impartial overseer. Debbie stomped off to get supervisor. Supervisor asks how I know she can't be impartial, and I tell him that I have it on good authority that Jill, who was on the other end of this complaint, is a close friend of Debbie. He asked Debbie if this was true, to which she only replied, "I can be impartial." Supervisor took a deep breath, asked the other HR rep to come with him, and the 4 of us all went to review the complaint. I thanked them for being so accommodating. I was worried I'd annoyed them. Debbie took out the complaint and all 3 of them went through it with me. Debbie looked homicidal the whole time the interview was happening, as she had clearly anticipated firing me, or at least recommending me being fired. The interview went something like this. It took over half an hour and they kept asking me the same questions but phrased different ways, so this is a really drastically condensed version. Q. You said outside that you think Jill last name reported you. Why is this? A. Jill has had an issue with me for about 3 months now. Q. Why didn't you come to us when you realized Jill had an issue? A. I had no issue with her. Q. What issue does Jill have with you? A. 4 years ago a specialist identified potentially cancerous cells in my breast tissue. I had surgery to remove my breast tissue, thereby removing the cells and the risk. After the surgery I was left with large scars on my chest. I went to a therapist for low self-esteem and depression. The therapist suggested a plastic surgeon who suggested breast implants to cover my scars. All of this is in my medical history, which you have a copy of in my file and my full permission to review. Jill found out about my breast implants but didn't know about the cancer. Jill had a problem with my breast implants and decided to communicate this problem to our coworkers. Q. Why do you feel this is true? A. Here's 16 signed statements all from different coworkers, all testifying that Jill told the entire office I'd had breast implants on the day she found out and has since made comments about these implants frequently. They have quotes of what Jill said to them about it and rough dates and times. Q. Rough dates and times? A. No one knew this would be escalated to such an extent, so no one really took notes as and when it happened. Q. What event or events do you think directly led to this complaint of harassment? A. For me, harassment began when Jill told everyone about my breast implants without my consent, but as to the complaint placed against me, it would probably be what happened at about time yesterday in the lunchroom. Jill made a comment about me being shallow while gesturing to my breasts, and I replied by giving her an abridged version of my relevant medical history and ending with a comment about the importance of getting the full story. There are cameras in the lunchroom, so I'm sure you'll be able to find that conversation. I'll admit I could have handled the situation better, but after 3 months I felt I had to put my foot down. Here's a list of names of people who were also present. There were 6 people at the table, including myself and Jill. One of these people is also in those letters, and has written their account of the conversation and signed it. Q. Had you had a conversation with Jill prior to this regarding her comments about you? A. Several, spaced out over the last 3 months. Each time I communicated to her that I felt uncomfortable and upset with these comments she was making and would appreciate it if she were to stop. Q. To your knowledge, was Jill made aware of your former cancer at any point in this time? A. Number. It wasn't mentioned in the conversation with my friend she overheard, and I didn't tell her because frankly it's none of her business, and I did not feel the need to detail my medical history to a coworker in order to avoid further sexual harassment. Supervisor stands up and says, "Well, I think we're done here." He shakes my hand and sends me back to my desk saying that I'd hear from them after they reviewed the evidence, letters, CCTV, medical history and anything they had already, and made a decision on the case. I got back to my desk, pulled up my CV, and prepared to start the job search again. About an hour goes by, then the person who wrote the letter and was there for the lunchroom conversation gets called for a meeting with HR. They come back 10-ish minutes later. The other people who were also there for the lunchroom conversation get called one by one, except Jill. All of them are gone for about 10 minutes, then come back, find a coworker, and say that HR wants to see them. Then the people who wrote letters but weren't there yesterday are also called one by one and are each gone for about 10 minutes each, some longer, some shorter. By about 3:30 it looks like everyone who wrote a letter or was there in the lunchroom has been interviewed. Then, finally, Jill gets called in. She's gone for about 30 minutes and comes back fuming. She glares at me while I work, but I ignore her. 4:30ish, Jill gets called into HR again. 5 p.m. rolls around, everyone is either leaving or getting ready to leave, when Jill storms back into the office. She glares at me the whole time she packs up her desk. She then starts telling anyone who will listen that I got her fired before shoving her way onto the lift. An email comes in from HR. My case is closed. TLDR. Coworker harassed me over having implants, which I only got because I had cancerous cells. I called her out, she reported me to HR for calling her out. I got a bunch of people to write statements of all the times she harassed me and she got fired instead. Also, I've been told that isn't what a reverse Uno is, but I can't change it. Eat it. Just want to add that regardless of my reasons for getting implants, I still should not have been harassed over them. It just happened to be relevant here because it made Jill look like a real dick, which is probably why she reported me.